I'm going to call the meeting to order. First, I just want to remind everybody to please silence your cell phones or any devices that you have, and that the meeting is being videotaped, so anything that you say when you step to the podium will be recorded and part of our meeting. Ken, could we start with roll call?
Sure. Blackburn?
Present.
Deroni?
Here.
Hageman?
Here.
Hedge? Oops, sorry. Wrong list. Wrong list. Pardon me. McAlexander?
Here.
Mishigian?
Here.
Miller? Here. Howard?
Here.
My apologies. Too many H's in my life.
Thank you. Next, we have approval of the agenda. I think we have something to add. Bill, did you want to add
Yeah, we
something?
do. Bill, would you introduce this, please?
Yes, I'm going to, Ken, if you wouldn't mind also passing it around. Tonight we have with us Sharon McLaughlin from Dickerson Wright, who is bond counsel. We also have, you're going to see a presentation from Brody Killian from PFM. Eric got us an engagement letter yesterday evening, and I just wanted to put this out and give everyone an opportunity to quickly just review it. And the reason why we want to add it is an engagement letter is used in order to engage Dickerson Wright. Should we go through and have the ability or need to issue bonds. Stepping back a real couple seconds, we're going with the original recommendation from the Roads Committee, going through the SIB loan from the state of Michigan, Department of Transportation. However, at the same time, should we not be approved for the amount that we're asking for or a less amount, we have to have a plan B, and the plan B would be whatever SIB loan would be authorized or approved for, plus whatever makeup of a bond that we would need to be able to issue. And we have to do that with 45 days notice in a publication, the Eagle, to the public. And I want to make sure that we start both processes concurrently, so should we have to go down the bond route, that we would be prepared to be able to do that. Obviously, this doesn't commit us to anything until we actually go through the issuance of a bond if we need to, but I just wanted to make sure that, since Eric got it to me last night, that council was aware of it.
Okay, so you want to add that? I mean, is that 6B or is that,
6C?
do you want to add 6C?
Yes, it'd be 6C, approval of engagement letter.
Yes, and I also just wanted to also comment, I had a conversation with Dirk this morning, I was going to say this afternoon, but this morning, and Dirk advised that what we would do is that it would be a simple motion that would be offered by council to approve the engagement letter.
And I've reviewed the letter, and it's fine from a legal standpoint. It's fairly straightforward and boilerplate.
Okay, great. So we will revisit that when we get to new business, and one or both of you can add any more detail at that time to lend to our conversation. So then we need a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Also move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next is the approval of the regular village council meeting minutes, November 25th, 2024.
Madam Chairman, I wish to amend the council minutes of 11/25/24 as follows. Under trustee comments, in the second sentence, which now reads, Howard noted meet the candidates forum that took place prior to the November election, and that she will submit her summary, or her event summary, to village staff. The correction should read, in talking about the Meet the Candidates open house on 10/8/24, Howard indicated that she prepared a recap that was put into outline form, which she would like to have submitted as a document with her trustee comments. And Howard went on to state it deals with the areas of communication, specifically council meetings, town hall gatherings, contact information, newsletters, citizen involvement and advisory committees, preservation of the village with long-term infrastructure planning and care of the environment. Those were the topics included in the recap.
Could you speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's fine to submit the recap to the village. The recap itself should not be part of the minutes, though. So, the preparation of the recap, that's fine. Submitting it to the village, that's fine. But because it's a recap of a private meeting, not a meeting of a public body, it should not be actually part of the minutes themselves.
I'm sorry, it was not a private meeting. It was open to the public. Every member of the village
It
was
was,
invited to attend.
it was open to the public. It wasn't sponsored by the village. I believe it was held in a church. So it's not a public meeting under the Open Meetings Act. And minutes emanate from the Open Meetings Act, the requirements for minutes. So again, it's fine to have it on file at this, at the village, but it should not be incorporated. The comment is fine, but the recap itself should not be incorporated into the minutes.
So my comment, as amended, states the topics that were discussed. It doesn't make any comment about them, but it says that these items were discussed. So that's the motion that I'm making on the floor.
Well, our legal counsel is telling us that that type of recap or discussion should not be included in minutes. It wasn't part of a meeting, and the minutes are a recap of our meetings.
Right, it's a meeting, it's just not a meeting of a public body, which under the Open Meetings Act requires minutes. That's the distinction.
But comments of other citizens that have discussions are included in our minutes. So these are comments
They're
that
comments
emanated
that,
from the citizens.
they're comments by citizens that are made at this meeting, which is a public body under the Open Meetings Act that requires us to have minutes. But that meeting, while the public was invited and obviously some members attended, is not a public body under the Open Meetings Act. So that's the rationale for my conclusion.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
It says that it has to be announced. It has to be announced to the residents,
What does?
a meeting of any sort, to be considered a village meeting,
That's one of the requirements, sure.
right?
Notice, right?
So every resident received a letter talking about this and inviting them to come and share their thoughts, and more importantly, meet the candidates. We thought they had a right to know who was running to be their representative. So that doesn't qualify as notice?
It qualifies as notice, but notice is only one requirement, and notice is only required for the meeting of a public body. That meeting was not a meeting of a public body as under the Open Meetings Act. It was a private meeting sponsored for, purposes to allow people to come and get to know the candidates. But again, wasn't sponsored by the village, wasn't put on by the village. It's not a public body, so.
I do have a comment here. According to Robert's Rules, Section 48.3, to modify the rules governing what is regularly to be included in the minutes requires adoption of a special rule of order, although a majority vote may direct the inclusion of special additional information in the minutes of a particular meeting. And that's all I'm requesting.
Look, if the motion passes, that's fine. I've made my recommendation, I've given you my legal opinion. If you decide to go in a different direction, that's certainly within your purview.
Well, the motion is on the floor to amend the minutes as read.
A second.
So, next would be discussion. I would like to amend the motion then to include the fact that we are going against our attorney's recommendation. So this is something new that we don't ever, have
Fine.
never done before. And so, I think that, let me get to my notes on this. So, we had a lot of discussion with our previous council about minutes. We spent months talking about minutes. We spent a lot of money talking about minutes. some of the things that came out of that, other than the fact that, we don't wanna veer away from Robert's rules, because if we veer away from Robert's rules on this, what else are we gonna veer away from? The minutes are an important document of what the council has done. And if we start, we're sort of making a statement right now. We are disregarding our attorney, who's been a municipal attorney for over 40 years. We're disregarding Ken's expertise, which has been in municipal government for 6+ years. We're disregarding the president, who has more experience as an elected official than all of you put together. And I just want to make sure that we are documenting this correctly, that we are going against, you all are comfortable, whoever's going to vote for this, is comfortable going against the legal opinion of somebody who's been doing municipal government for over 40 years. So I just want to put that on the table.
And I just wanted to make one correction. This is a one-time, it is not a change to what's in me. This is a one-time thing that we are voting on, to include this additional information.
I would totally
That's-
disagree with you, because next month, if I doodle on a piece of paper and say I want that included in the minutes, now it's gonna be included in the minutes. We are saying that any attachment to the minutes is going to be included in the minutes. So if somebody stands up and hands us something political, a Bible, whatever it is, at the podium and says, I now want these included in the minutes, they will be included in the minutes
Well,
from
we
then
have to
on
vote
out.
on it.
We have to
don't
vote on it.
I mean, the council
Yes.
votes on
Mhm.
it.
That's
You
right.
vote on approving the minutes,
Yeah,
but we
so
can't.
the addition.
I'm still talking. If we're voting that we're going to, Robert's rule says that things that are not an actual action of the meeting are not to be included in the minutes. If we do this today, we are changing more than just this list. And I wish I would have known this was coming, because I would have had further conversation about the fact that this is not an all-inclusive list of what was discussed at that event.
The topics are only what I'm listing.
Yeah.
This was not, I'm not trying to talk about what we said about these things. These are only the topics that were
But
covered.
not all the topics covered are here. So I had a phone call from somebody that attended that meeting who was very concerned that it really wasn't just a meet and greet to meet the new candidates, that it was basically a public forum to bring up these types of issues which should have been discussed with all of council. And there are other topics that were discussed that are not listed on this list. So this is a list of what somebody thought was important during that meeting to list, but this is not an all-inclusive list
Didn't
as
say
to
it
what was
was.
discussed.
I didn't say it was an all-inclusive list.
Also, since we're going to bring this up, so that forum is not what trustees should be doing. And the trustees were told that trustees should not be holding this type of event outside of a public meeting. So if people are talking about village business, it should be in a public meeting. But the trustees decided to go along and go ahead with this meeting regardless of what election rules say. Normally, the League of Women Voters would hold this type of event because they're a very impartial body. So trustees should not be holding this type of event. And even though it wasn't sponsored by the village, it was sponsored by 2 HOAs in the village who paid for the postage, the copying of full-page color copies, the envelopes, the food, even though the room you said was gifted, all of that needs to go on your forms. So you are now put in a position where you have to declare all of those expenses, whether they were gifted to you or not. But that's up to you. It's your campaign. You do what you want. My concern is that 2 HOAs in the village paid for this.
They did not.
And
They did not spend any HOA money on this.
you told me
They
that
they were-
Outlands,
They were presenting, they were the
Outlands?
presenters. They were the-
Outlands,
They were the presenters,
I'm
Lisa.
speaking.
I-
She's
Outlands-
answering
I'm trying to
you.
answer
Come
you.
on.
I'm telling you
And
what you
correct.
told me. Outlands and Bingham Road HOA sponsored and paid for this.
No, I never
No.
said that, never said that. I never
My
said that.
concern is,
I never
that-
said that.
in sponsoring this event,
Presenting it, they were presenters.
whatever language you want to use, we now have 3 candidates who may or may not feel indebted to those HOAs because they held this event for them. So now we have 3 trustees who may or may not be voting in a certain way because certain HOAs sponsored this event. And that is
Then-
extremely concerning to me. This is why public officials should never, ever get involved in election or anything on the ballot. And I will just say that I am concerned about that fact, because we, as a council, have voted to do SADs. Because half of the village approximately is private roads and half is public roads. And we heard the concern from the private road people that they have to save for their own roads. So we, as council, the previous council, decided to do SADs to sort of give a break and let them collect their monies for their roads. But then, the HOA, and this, I'm gonna go with what you told me, paid for an
No.
event like this. And you can say they
Misstatement.
didn't, you told me they did,
I never did.
and I'm concerned about the fact that our staff, our attorney, myself, our treasurer is spending a lot of time and a lot of money to create SADs where the public road people are gonna have to pay and the private road people are not, because they need to pay for their own roads, but then turned around and sponsored an event like
There's
this.
an amendment on the floor right now, which is up for motion, and you've been speaking for more than 3 minutes. Can we please move forward as a point of order?
Excuse me,
on-
council can speak as long as we want.
I see. On
So.
unrelated subjects to this, but
It's all related as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
We're talking about the event that was hosted and sponsored against, again, legal representation. I had called and said that council trustees should not be hosting this type of event because of this type of issue, to where now we have 2 trustees who have done this for these 3 trustees. We have HOAs involved, and full council couldn't even be there. We could not all have attended if we wanted to. So, no, we could not. We could have waited out in the hall or go stand in the parking lot, but all 7 trustees could not be there. Our staff was also not invited, by the way, so they were not there as well. So, if we're gonna start going down this road where we are going to disregard our attorney, I want it documented, because if we're called to the carpet, in the future for reasons, if we're gonna continue to disregard our attorney's advice, I need to know that moving forward, because I've never been in any type of elected position where I'm held responsible and gone against an attorney's advice, and that just makes me really uncomfortable. And I also would like to know, like, okay, so if it votes to go in the minutes, then what? Then what?
It's in the minutes,
There's a
period.
record
It's on record.
of what our residents believed was important to them. And you know, this gets back to the fact that you knew we were doing this because you called Bingham Woods and spoke with the president and told her to uninvite us to their clubhouse, because that was our original location. That's after I called the office and I asked back July 1st, I asked, please send out an announcement to all residents that we're seeking candidates to run for trustee. Do you think you could do that in the next few days? And Ken replied with, well, no, I can't. And I said, Ken, why wouldn't you want as many residents as possible to know so we can begin recruiting for those that are interested in running? I've never done that before and I'm not gonna do it now. That's exactly what I was told. So that's when I thought, well, then we've gotta do something, because we need to have residents engaged in government. And I'll tell you, the minister at the church closed the meeting by making the comment, we are achieving what our mission is to outreach to the community, to have the community come and use our beautiful fellowship hall, and to listen to citizens express their thoughts. So the other thing about open meetings is the problem is when you get into negotiation, you get into deliberation, and the really sinful thing is taking a vote, which never happened. It didn't happen when I sent out an email to the trustees. I didn't ask for a vote, didn't ask to deliberate. I sent it out to inform. The same with Jim when he talked about his issue. Didn't ask for deliberation, didn't ask for a vote. We have to be careful about representing what the rules are. And you know, I have to say, I get back to having a builder as our president, that you never thought there was any conflict about that. And even when in next door, he made the comment because somebody objected to the DRB being dissolved and objected to sending the letter out and using mailboxes, which is somewhat problematic. And his response was that we can't expect builders and developers to wait for our residents to have an election to make a decision, which we've been doing for the life of this village. And I can't imagine why we can't have a builder or development wait for our due process, that this builder, president of our council, was expecting us to change our rules and alter our charter in order to meet the needs of builders. You know, there was no clandestine going on. We talked openly, everybody got the letter that is a registered voter. We were open about this. And my request, our request, to have this as part of the village, I'm just shocked that when you heard about it, it wasn't, okay, how can we do this? Let's make this a village thing, we'll put it in the paper and see what we can do to build continuity, to build some kind of sense of real community here. This was a great opportunity. And I'm sorry to see that it's being bandied about as something so illegal and out of bounds, that I don't think it is, but.
First of all, I did not call Bingham Woods. They felt, when they were approached, it was presented, they interpreted it as, this was going to be a village
Mhm.
council
Okay.
event.
Okay,
And it was not a village council event.
it could have been.
They wanted to know if it was a council event, and I said no, and they said, we never open up our facility for things like this. We were doing it because we had let them use this room, they thought this was gonna be payback. And I said, this is not a village council event, so I did not call and ask them to cancel the event. I also offered to have this type of thing at a council meeting, after a council meeting, inviting people to come and speak
Did she say
to
that
each
you?
other. Yes, I did.
No,
Not
you
to
didn't
me,
tell us.
never to me.
Yes, I did.
No,
To
you did
come
not
after,
say a
or
word.
That would have been the right place to start, to just have it be noticed, and then all of council could have been there. That's all I have to say on it. But if we're going to move forward, going against our attorney's advice, because now you've also brought up the, the emailing, which I don't wanna talk about right now, because that's a completely separate subject. But if we're gonna continue to do that type of thing, I need to know. I need to know if this council is going to start to veer away from the Open Meetings Act, Robert's rules, and taking the advice of our attorney. I would like to know
I'd like
that.
to say a few things, because I don't know about all this stuff. I know I was there because I was one of the candidates. The League of Women Voters, when I look back on past events, had the candidates come and speak, answer questions, why were they running, what did they think they could do good for Bingham Farms, blah, blah, blah. We were notified by the League of Women Voters that that wouldn't happen because we were running unopposed.
Right.
Okay, so when the idea of a town hall came up where we could come and present ourselves in a similar way to anybody in the village that wanted to come, to me, it seemed like a great idea. I was there along with the two gentlemen on my left and right. To me, it was a perfectly acceptable event that was run very well. We got up, we introduced ourselves individually. I didn't even know what the agenda was. I just showed up. We were asked to introduce ourselves. We did. Told a little bit about our background, why we wanted this job. What could we do to make Bingham Farms better? And then we took questions. It was that benign. So making it out to be something more than that is just not right. I was there. As far as wanting to put in the minutes one thing or another, that we're going against the advice of our attorney, I've been around Dirk enough to have highly respect him. I know he's highly respected within this village and with all the communities around here. But he's not telling us it's legal or illegal. He's just giving us advice. Lawyers give advice all the time. People choose to take the advice some of the time. People choose to not take the advice some of the time. That's not abnormal for a legal counsel and the client that he's representing. It's perfectly normal. There's nothing abnormal about it. If we're going to violate something that could hurt us, we need to hear about it. Otherwise, I don't get we're gonna vote against the legal counsel. We're not voting against legal counsel. We're just saying we don't agree that we don't want to follow that particular piece of his advice. That's it. We do this all the time. This is the way lawyers and clients work together.
Right, but his advice is based on Robert's rules and the Open Meetings Act.
But he's
And
not
we've
tell-
always followed Robert's rules and the Open Meetings Act.
It's right here.
So if we're gonna go against the Open Meetings Act and Robert's rules.
So are we gonna go against Open Meeting Act?
No, it's not a violation of the Open Meetings
Okay.
Act.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a slippery slope, though, because what happens when somebody in the audience that has a particular personal stake in something
Yeah.
says, we held a meeting and this should go into the minutes, it's gonna be a little difficult for the council at that point to say, well, no, that doesn't go in the minutes, but this does. So it creates a slippery slope, but to directly answer your question, no, it's not a violation of the Open Meetings Act.
Okay.
Certainly, it's not required by the Open Meetings
Okay.
Act, because it is not the minutes of a public body. I'm surprised that this issue has devolved into discussion of other things. Well, I'll just leave it at that.
So, the motion is on the floor, and there's been a discussion.
Well, I do have something to discuss, and that's up to the president to conduct the meeting, so let's remember that. What you read, I don't have an issue with what you read. I told you that in the email, that I think maybe it's valuable. But my problem, what you just read, you didn't read in the minutes, in the comments. You went way beyond what you said at the meeting, which was recorded. And, I mean, we
I
could
took
write
this
that
right-
verbatim, but you read off
I did.
everything that was in your email. And I don't know that we could really put that, or in your recap, excuse me. You didn't say that last month, so to insert it now is sort of
I looked at the video and I took word for word what I said in the video. At
Okay,
1
hold on.
hour, 47
Hold on.
minutes
What you
into the
just
video.
read was much longer than that. You just
No.
read the entire recap.
No, I did not.
You did, I think you did.
I
We
did not
can
read.
watch it later, but I think you just read the whole recap.
I watched it 5 times this afternoon.
No, just now. I mean, right now. I think you just read the entire recap. We can't really.
I did not. I read one section.
Okay, all right, I'm not gonna argue. I
I-
thought you did.
No, not
All
at
right.
all. I don't
In that
like.
case,
no.
I apologize to you. I thought you read the recap.
This is the full recap. I
Yeah.
read, and here is one sentence that I
I
read.
just said I apologize, so that's
Thank you.
fine. I
Thank
thought
you.
you read the recap, because I
No.
read it myself several times.
This
It
is,
sounded like you did.
no,
We'll watch it again later on, I suppose.
please do.
I still am wondering though, what are we gonna do with this? So it goes into the minutes, and then what are we gonna do with this?
Like other council members, I go back and look at the printed minutes. And it brings to mind other things. And I need to have what the citizens are asking for and concerned about brought to my mind. And that's a trigger for that.
We all do.
And there's nothing wrong with just having a trigger to say, hey, as a council member, what's our goal and objective for this year, for our term? And this, in my mind, helps me set the goals and objectives to serve my constituents. Not myself, my constituents, which are the people of Bingham Farms.
But those values and goals can be brought up at a public meeting here, or you can restate them yourself. But to have minutes of a private meeting included in the minutes of a public meeting certainly is
Well, as-
required by the Open Meetings Act.
As
I'll see.
Councilman McAlexander stated, you gave an opinion, and it's not breaking a rule. And again, according to Robert's rules, a majority vote may direct the inclusion of additional specific information in the minutes of a particular meeting. That's all that we're talking about. We're not changing anything. We are just putting additional information if there's a majority vote to do so. And that's where we're at.
But Robert's Rules of Order applies to both private entities and public entities, not simply to public entities. There's a separate set of rules for public entities. But you should probably call the question. Go on.
So I'm confused, what exactly are we trying to put in there?
This.
No, not at all. I did not say that. The corrected, I'm saying
Are we just saying that
what,
you had a meeting and you wanted people just to know that you had a meeting?
that there was a recap in outline form, and I wanted it submitted as a document. That was my comment,
So,
and
yeah,
that was my
to your
comment.
point, the words that you said in the council meeting last month,
Mhm.
you want that verbatim in the notes, not the attachment is submitted
That will be submitted to the office
to
to
the
do
office if
whatever
anybody wants to
they-
go read it.
And we
Yes.
have that.
They have
Right.
that.
So,
So this is just the words in the minutes. I did not submit an event summary to village staff. I didn't say that.
You-
Instead, I said, she indicated she prepared a recap that was put into outline form, which she would like to have submitted as a document. That's what I asked for. That's what I asked for in the minutes.
That's a good point. So basically, you're not asking that the recap
No,
be part
not
of the
at all.
minutes.
And I went on
That's
to
a problem.
state in my recap that the topics were X, Y, and Z, not all the detail here. These are just the topic, the headings, communications, that's it.
Do you have an issue with the synonym of summary and recap? We use the word summary. I thought that was pretty close to recap. No? No? Okay. So why don't we table the minutes, and, because I'm not sure that we're gonna get all of what we're saying here. Let's table the minutes. Send me what you think,
What I just read.
yes, email it to us so that we can
Okay.
incorporate it in,
Mhm.
and then we can approve it in January.
Okay.
And I don't want next month to have some sort of issue with, if we try to get it in now, and then you look at it and it's not accurate, or
Mhm.
to your precise recommendation. I would rather have it all buttoned up in January in one fell swoop, rather than going back and trying to correct an amendment. Does that sound good?
Fine.
So I will move that we table the approval of last month's agenda.
Does something have to be withdrawn first before the,
Okay.
before, I'm not
There,
sure.
there was a motion, and I think there was a second.
There is.
I think Eric seconded it, so yeah, you'd have to, you could just withdraw the second.
I withdraw the second.
There you go.
Okay, go ahead, Yee, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just move that we table the minutes until next meeting.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next is public comment, not on published agenda. Somebody would like to speak, please come up to the podium. Seeing none, we'll move to discussion topics. We will start with the police department monthly report.
How's everybody tonight? now that we're all warmed up, I guess. So we've had a busy month or so, and I've talked to several of you about some of the things that have been going on in Bingham Farms and Franklin. And this is the time of year, right around the holidays, we see a little bit influx of crime, and we have seen that a little bit. So just yesterday, we had a larceny of a package off a porch. This is very common this time of year. I know you see it all over the news. The good news is that not always are these individuals that smart, and these three individuals took an Uber to the address. So we've identified them, and we'll be visiting them shortly to send them up to Oakland County Jail for a visit. We had 4 stolen vehicles last month, 2 in Franklin, 2 in Bingham Farms. 3 out of the 4 stolen cars, people left their keys in the car, which is never a good idea. The one vehicle that didn't have the keys in the car, we just recovered this weekend in Detroit. And the vehicle actually wasn't that damaged at all, so that's back with the owner. We don't really have any other leads on the other vehicles. I mean, there's stolen cars happening all over the place. I think we've been pretty fortunate in this area, but crews come in and out of the villages, and they're looking for people that leave their keys in the car, so please don't do that. I have an update on an investigation that we've been working on for quite some time. The investigation began on November 11th, 2023. It was alleged at the time that the former CEO of the Lupus Foundation, based right here in Bingham Farms, had allegedly embezzled over $103,000 from May of 2015 through March of 2022. Our investigation concluded on June 24th of 2024. We presented our investigation up to the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office, and they issued a felony warrant for embezzlement from a nonprofit group, which is a 10-year felony. And at the time of our investigation, we knew that the suspect was in Peru, in country Peru. So it wasn't like I was going to fly there and get him. So we worked with our federal partners, and we were able to flag all the entry points in the United States, and we knew that he was coming into Washington, D.C. 2 weekends ago, and he came to Washington, D.C., and the airport police was nice enough to arrest him. The Oakland County Fugitive Apprehension Team went down to Washington, D.C. and brought him back to us. So he's was in our custody. He's been arraigned. So that was a really good, I thought, case for our department. We also had a a business that was broken into, Cadova, last month. They broke out the front door. They immediately went, got the safe, and they left. Camera footage shows, 3 hooded individuals. We didn't get any license plate or any vehicle description of the vehicle. We interviewed all the employees, and it's pretty much a dead end at this point. But that is the update at this point. Is there any questions on what I sent you as far as the reports?
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a great holiday. Thank you very much.
Thanks, you
Thank
do
you.
the same.
Chief,
The fire chief had to leave for a meeting. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was supposed to be at.
we'll get with him.
You are.
We will reconnect with him next month.
All
Thank
right.
you. But you all have the fire report in your packets. If you have any questions, you can save them for January, when the chief will be back. Next is the manager's report.
Yeah, thank you. This is rather short. It's only 2 weeks into the month, because of the odd month that we have here. I just want to remind everybody regarding the roads import portal, to gather additional information, from residents. Hubble, Roth and Clark has created this portal. Anybody can log on to it and report issues, regarding roads or drainage. It's fairly user-friendly. We went over how to use it last month. Please take advantage of it if you live north of 13 Mile Road and you'd like to report an issue regarding roads and upcoming reconstruction. Other than that, because we have a couple of people here to present today, that's all I have to say.
Could I just say one thing about the roads portal? It is very user-friendly. It's easy to get into, it's easy to understand. And I think you can be anonymous, but yet, anybody's comments are posted. So I guess it posted without your name, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it's nice to be able to see that not only what I'm putting in there, but what others have put in there. And you can see where they plotted it on the map and all
Right.
that stuff. It's pretty cool.
It is.
Nice.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Next, we have Yevgeny with the Economic Development Coordinator, Administrative Assistant report.
Similarly, due to a short month, I don't have a lot to add to my report since we met last in November. We've, as I mentioned in the report, we've reached out to both the building owners and whatever contacts we have for the proprietors of the 2 new restaurants that are planning on opening in the village. That would be the Royal Thai Cuisine and the Smalls Restaurant, taking up the formerly known as Mandolin Place. And we haven't heard back from them. I expect with the holidays coming up, we'll probably be communicating with them in the new year, much more likely than this year. So I'll certainly keep you appraised of any developments on that front.
May I have some clarification on the signage about Jimmy John's? I mean, you indicated that we're going to basically make the signage ordinances a little more friendly, right?
Correct.
But then they submitted something?
No.
Oh, okay, I thought I was reading.
They are waiting to resubmit their signage designs. The previous text is what I've been posting, reporting
okay,
on this
okay.
topic prior. So the
Okay, so the
italicized is the update.
Is-
Everything
okay.
else is
everything else,
Yeah.
okay, so it's
All
not a
hands.
continuation, thank you, thank you, okay.
Anything else for Yevgeny? Okay, moving on to new business, we have a presentation. Thank you for being patient. We have next year, if one or both of you would like to step to the
I'm so tech savvy.
podium, we have Mark Cummins from Birmingham and Chris Braun from Next. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us here tonight. Chris and myself, we're longtime partners in crime in this event. You know, it's nice to, as a former police chief of Birmingham, when I got Kurt up here, Kurt, you could have done better. Kurt is a great guy, he's an outstanding police
Yeah.
officer. We didn't have crime in Birmingham, so I'm not quite sure who he's talking about. I wish you the best of luck.
I'm sure you didn't.
Yeah, we just had misunderstandings. So the reason I'm here tonight is I really want to take a minute. I know, Ken, you obviously shared the letter that we sent with everybody.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just give basically an update in person to let kind of know what we've been going on in the city and with Next. As you all know, the school district has an early childhood development center at the same building where Next is. It takes up about 2/3 of the building, and Next has about 1/3 of it. The state of Michigan has changed their policy, so now that they can now get preschool funding from the state for 4-year-old preschoolers. So the state, or the school district wants to get a pipeline of new students into the district and keep those districts, and it's also a funding source. So we kind of knew in the end that our time at Midville was limited. So the city of Birmingham, realizing the value of Next and the fact that we think it's an outstanding service to our residents as well as your own residents, they made it a priority of the commission to come up with a plan to try and find a new home for Next. We became aware of the fact that the YMCA in Birmingham, which is located on 400 East Lincoln, they were gonna close that location and move to a joint location on 13 Mile Road in Royal Oak. So the city then negotiated with the Y, and they were able to purchase that building in June of '23 for $2 million. That purchase price included $1.5 million from the city of Birmingham and $500,000 from Next. We did it as a partnership. And at the time that we did that, we agreed that we would be the primary owner of the building, or that we would be the sole owner of the building, but we would then guarantee Next $1 of rent per year in perpetuity, as long as they were serving our residents. So when we bought the building, we originally thought we were gonna put a $3 to $5 million renovation into the building. We also moved to get a senior millage. The senior millage did not go against your Headley tax rate. So we thought, okay, we're moving in the right direction. We also hired a construction manager to assist us with the project, and we also created an ad hoc senior committee so that we could get as much input from the community as we could as we went forward with our project. So we hired a professional architecture company to do an assessment of the building and then do some potential conceptual designs of that building. So from that point, we found out from our experts that the building is in such poor shape, that there's been such delayed maintenance, that it is not, the cost of renovating is going to be very similar to the cost of what it would be to build a new building. Now, when we bought the building originally, it was going to be solely for Next. The YMCA, the current resident, was going to be out after 3 years, right, and possibly maintain a very small presence in the building. So we thought, okay, well, if that's the case, then we'll move forward with a new home for Next, a new building. Well, as negotiations and things came forward, YMCA had a change in leadership, and they actually wanted to remain in the building and also provide community resources and services to the city. And then when we had our public engagement meetings with the communities, they also wished for the YMCA to stay, and they also were very concerned about the lack of the city of the city closing the pool, because when we bought the building, our intention was to close the pool. So we're coming to a new point in time, is that now we're looking at, through our committees and through the city commission decisions, we're now looking at a new building between 44 and 49,000 square feet that will be the home to both Next and the YMCA. And as such, we're looking at, we've just hired a final architect to come up with designs to work with the two tenants. We call them tenants because the city of Birmingham will be the sole owner of the building, and then we'll work with Next for $1 a year, and then we're gonna work out whatever we can with the Y in terms of what they'll come to an agreement. So one of the reasons I came today is because as a partners in an interlocal agreement, we get the city of Birmingham to understand that this is our building, and we're gonna go to our constituents for a bond issue of about $32 million once we get it all settled and done. So that service on that's about $2.3 million a year to Birmingham taxpayers. If you split the difference between Y and Next in the building in half, it's about $1.3 million for Next alone. So obviously, each one of our communities submits a financial contribution to the support of Next and Next services, which accounts for about 18% of Chris's budget each year. So the city of Birmingham is going to be on the hook for that debt service for the millage, or excuse me, for the bond issue for the building. So what we're looking for is, obviously we want the services to continue for our own residents and for your residents. So one of the things that we do is we currently are paying about $125,000 a year towards the service aspect to Next, the city's contribution to Next. So what we're thinking, or what the city's going to do, is retract that $125,000 and replace it with $1.3 million a year in the building costs. So obviously, we're very concerned about Kristen being able to maintain services to all of our residents. So we'd like to sit down with Ken and Dirk, who I know well, and Beverly Hills and Franklin, and sit down and see if we can come to reopen the interlocal agreement and see if we can come to some resolution to try and keep Next open for all of our communities at a price that's reasonable for our seniors to afford. And we think our research through Next is that they're an amazing organization that, Chris, I'm sure I could probably be page 3 there, but I had doing a real good job with my PowerPoint. I always struggle with
I read it.
I hear it talking, I think, I'm gonna read it, it's not my style, so I apologize. But now I lost my train of thought.
You were talking about Next and how efficient we are.
Yeah, so there's so many things about Next that I think that people don't realize. You have your occupancy numbers there, resident numbers and memberships from each one of our communities, but one of the things that you don't see there are the support services that Next does, and they'll help anyone whether you're a member or not. And obviously, most people who ask for help don't want to be named, they don't want to be known because they're embarrassed by it or whatever, but you know, 5%, we're doing an ad hoc aging in place study in Birmingham, and we've got kind of realization where 5% of our population is considered indigent or under less than $30,000 a year. Well, those people need help, just like anyone else does. So Next is a very valuable service. We're all lucky to have them, and I think what we're doing is we're extending an olive branch out to everybody to see if we can come together and make sure that Chris and her staff and has a nice new home in Birmingham that all of us can enjoy and all of your residents can use as well. So, obviously, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer those questions. Sure, go ahead.
When I look at the funding models page of your information, I added up the municipal contributions from Birmingham, Beverly Hills, Bingham Farms, and Franklin, 190,000, and of the resident count, the next members, it was 1,573. I'll say locals, because their municipality is also kicking in money. But then on the other, Bloomfield Township, Bloomfield Hills, and all others, that next member count is 727, about half of the locals. But yet, the others' municipal contributions is 0.
That's correct.
Shouldn't that be adjusted?
Well, here's the thing, obviously Bloomfield Township has their own senior center,
Yeah.
but people choose to go to Next rather than their own. So they have to pay an out of their, we have a local membership cost, which covers the 4 municipalities in the local, interlocal agreement. And then if you wanna join Next and you're from Bloomfield Hills or Bloomfield Township, you pay a higher fee. And I'm sure that fee will have to be adjusted moving
yeah.
forward, as non-interlocal members to make sure that we have a
And the all others is like almost 400.
yeah, I think, well, you can probably speak, obviously, to that, you have what, 22?
2,300 members,
Yeah, and from 25 or 20, how many different communities?
55 different
Yeah,
municipalities.
55 different
Really?
places, yeah.
Okay.
And yes, you're right, we'll have to,
It's okay. It's okay.
we'll have to adjust our non-resident rates
Yeah.
moving forward. Right now, because we're having in-kind donation from the schools, I feel bad, I'm talking at the podium.
Go ahead.
Because we have we covered a lot of Birmingham school perimeter, and then the 4 municipalities in it are considered residents, but those who live in the section of Troy, that's Birmingham schools, and the section of Southfield, and you know, they were a little miffed that they're still paying school taxes, and why can't they also get a reduced rate? So our rates are not what they should be in a free market by any means, but they were under that agreement that was preceded me. But moving forward, definitely the non-residents will be paying, the non-resident locals, as you call them, would be paying substantially different.
And that's one of the reasons we want to get together with the interlocal partners to work out those details with Chris. Obviously, she's got to be able to establish ability to be financially solvable, so obviously, we want to kind of work with her to make sure she gets that.
Do you wanna do you wanna go ahead?
Well, no, actually, he did most of it. The only thing which is fine.
I'm really good at it.
And we do, Ken
It's in
was
the packet.
gracious enough to put it in the packet, so we did all have a chance to
No,
look at
I'm
it, but.
joking, but I did want to, just for some of the newer faces, explain to you what Next does, because I think, just talking about Next, whoops, I have to go back now. We have been in business for over 45 years, serving the communities of Beverly, Bingham, Franklin, and Birmingham primarily. We offer 230 events a month out of our building, which is only 10,000 square feet. Our membership has jumped about 260%, but we still have 10,000 square feet. So in order to serve the people that come to Next properly, we have been looking for a new home for a couple of years. And it has been frustrating in the city of Birmingham because it's pretty landlocked, there's not a lot of choices to build. And also, it's been difficult to try to share facilities with the schools. We worked with them for a long time, trying to get an extended lease, or at least with some leaseholder improvement modifications that we could do. And none of that came to fruition, and as Mark said, because they can make revenue out of increased preschool. So by buying the Y, it was a win-win. It's adjacent to a park that the city owns that we're going to make more senior-friendly. Having the Y there for some of the younger programming is suitable for us, and then having the senior services there. And then it will be also open to the community as well for what type of things have we?
Basically, we're hoping to put a walking track above the gym so that we'll have access for our residents to go walking in the inclement weather. We're hoping to have some workout and agreement that there'll be a couple hours a week of public use of the pool and or the gyms. Obviously, both Next and the Y close in the evening, but we can open that up after hours for pickleball. We're hoping to have 3 or 4 pickleball courts in the building so that we can have indoor pickleball in the wintertime, that kind of thing.
But what's important is, because we haven't had the amenities to offer that other senior centers have had, we've done, I think, a pretty good job with our innovative programming. We have amazing lifelong learning and enrichment opportunities, and that's why I think we're flourishing. But what a lot of people don't know that Mark alluded to is our support services. We support, for instance, a couple dozen people here in Bingham with Meals on Wheels and transportation, and they don't have to be low income. They have to be low income to qualify for your grant block money, your community development block grant money. But people who are alone, or people who just can't, don't have the same mobility or to get in the car and get to the grocery store, or things of that nature, get to their doctor's appointments. We do all of that. We can also do, and we have, fixed plumbing, rake leaves, clean gutters. We also have, set up appointments with Veterans Affairs to make sure that people are getting the veterans benefits and things. We do low income as well, and unfortunately, there's plenty of that around. But we also care for those who just don't have a lot of family around. Families are spread out across the country. Children aren't as close as they used to be, so having a place like Next to come to is really important, or to call. And as Mark said, you don't have to be a member to receive those services at all. So that's something else that we're very proud of, and that is really the foundation of what any senior center should do. But we just happen to do a whole lot of stuff in the building as well for members that want to stay active and engaged and meet more people and just kind of expand their network a little bit. People that, we see our members have a very strong sense of shared experiences, which I think is very important at this time. Yes?
I, at the event last week, the Christmas event, I had several of the board members come up to me and say, be sure you tell them that Next is my lifeline. That I was alone
Mm-hmm.
and had no family locally, and Next provided my quality of life.
We do hear that a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's personal,
Mm-hmm.
very personal. So I can attest to the voids you fill, and even others that you don't intend to fill, because you become family, you become friends with people,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just an amazing place. And then I learned my neighbor is a Meals on Wheels driver.
Oh, really?
She does every
Oh,
Tuesday.
Sue, yeah.
Mhm.
Every Tuesday.
She is, yeah.
She's
Mhm.
out delivering meals.
It's a fabulous
and loves
program
it.
Yeah.
to get eyes and understanding on someone's situation, because they don't normally go out.
Yeah,
So they
yeah.
have to be homebound to get Meals on Wheels. So I thank you for that, but we do hear that quite a bit. I mean, you retire and your work friends kind of go away, and then your friends start going to Florida or worse, and then, you might lose a spouse, and then all of a sudden you're looking for, hopefully long before any of that happens, you've come to Next. But some of the the support service clients are in a situation where they don't know where to turn, and some of them desperately need support.
Yeah.
All different kinds. So yes, we have great pickleball, we have great lectures, we have art classes, fitness classes, lots of coffees, lots of way to socialize, but we also have the support services that are really invaluable.
If anyone has not visited Next, please give Chris a call and go there, and just experience for yourself. Because go there and any time in the morning, you're gonna see something that will be a real eye-opener for you in terms of
Your
how busy
trips.
that facility is and what they do
Yeah.
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Your
It's
outings,
fantastic.
fabulous.
Yep. I was born and raised in this area, went to Birmingham schools, and I became a policeman in Birmingham. I was there for 38 years. One of the things I think is really unique about Next is we have the opportunity now, and now that Chris and I have become friends, if we can have our police departments and fire departments know that, if we can get it in their mindset, if they come across residents on patrol, when they're doing house checks, when they're doing alarms, if they
Yeah.
see something that they think is unusual, or they may need some follow-up, I want them to be comfortable, and I'm going,
Yeah.
because that's what we started to do in Birmingham, I'm sure, I know Kurt Lawson, he jumped all over that.
Yeah.
So it's another way we can kind of network with Next to try and make sure that if we come across residents that may need some services or need a little assistance, we can do that.
Great idea.
So we all agree it's a fabulous asset to our communities, all the communities. Basically, what we're looking for today, from what I understand, is just sort of a head nod to Dirk and Ken to just continue the conversation, figure out the financing, kind of dig into how this, open the
Interlocal.
interlocal agreement, and continue working on it. And
Right, so what
basically, we
to
don't
do-
need to
Obviously, we gotta get a
vote.
bond passed by our residents, they're gonna wanna
Right.
understand, well, okay, we're gonna foot the bill on this building, so how are these other communities gonna be, our commission uses the word equitable a lot, but, so
Right.
that's, we wanna make sure that, we sit down with our partners and come up with what we think is an equitable plan to bring back to our own commission and to our constituency, to say, hey, look, this is what we think is fair, and this is what people are willing to do, and that's why we wanna do that. So we need to do that sooner than later, because we've gotta get bond language done by the middle of February, we hope to go to a bond vote in either a special election in May or August.
Okay, so we're not gonna do an official vote. Basically, if anybody feels differently or just kind of a head nod to direct our village manager and our attorney to continue conversation to move forward to finding a resolution for all of this.
Will that conversation also include how much the village will
Absolutely.
willing to
And
pay.
we will have conversation about
And
that.
of
when
course,
it
that would come back.
Right,
for
yeah,
approval.
that's
Okay.
down the road, but
Thank you.
yes, absolutely.
We wouldn't commit to that without a vote of the council.
That's that's the easier question I was trying to ask.
We're just trying to make sure that the Chris has a funding source to maintain the current service level. Hopefully, if it's a hit, maybe more people will join.
Right.
I'm sure that's the case.
I hope so.
Our surveys show that a lot of people would love to join if our amenities were better, if we weren't in the wing of an old elementary school built in 1957 with, just got air conditioning about 3 years ago. So we are a little bit behind as far as what we're offering the community, except for the great programs
Yeah,
and the friendly faces.
can't
and-
beat the programs.
But you're also a 501c3, so if I
Yeah.
want to donate to you
I'm glad you brought
personally,
that up before the end of the
it'll be,
year.
it'll be a tax deduction,
You
right?
certainly can,
Yeah.
absolutely.
This is a great time to do that.
Yeah.
Great time. We're sort of unique. I will throw this out there, and it's certainly not, no, I'm not even gonna say it. We'll wait until after we get into negotiation to say it.
We are unique in the sense that we are a 501
Yeah.
and taking sort of, the city's outsourcing their senior services to us. And I would say at a much lower cost than they could do it themselves.
That's
Yeah.
for sure.
There's no way we could offer municipally what they offer.
No.
So we have agreed that we would like you
Thank
to
you.
continue conversation. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming.
and I will,
and
if it's okay with you, I will come back as we progress forward and keep you informed and keep you up to date, if that's okay with you.
That's absolutely,
Okay.
anytime you would like to be on the agenda, just contact Ken.
Perfect, yep.
Ken will put you on the agenda. Do you wanna
Yeah,
clarify?
when we talked in your office a couple of weeks ago, Chris,
Mhm.
the bond issue, special election in May,
Perhaps.
Yeah.
perhaps.
Mhm.
If it passes, I wrote this down in my note here. An average Birmingham household would pay $106 a year for 20 years? Is that right?
It's actually $218.50, but we would only, when we figure out the funding model, we would only be taking the portion of the building dedicated to Next.
It's,
When
so
we
half
do-
of that.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly, it's about $106, whatever that.
That's what I wrote, 106. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Ken, is
Yes.
it possible, considering the time of year and that our newsletter is coming out, is maybe saying one of the organizations that we strongly support next, serving all the seniors in this vicinity, is accepting donations, and each donation is tax deductible?
Yeah, I can put something in there.
I think that would
Definitely
really be nice.
And I also wanna make
I
sure
was
that
gonna say, I don't
everyone
know if
knows
that's
you.
legal, is it?
Um,
I love that sentiment, though.
If it was, if you're picking like the Red Cross or something like that, that's one thing, but the rules get a little easier when it's an entity that is providing a service that the municipality
Right.
itself could have provided.
Right.
Generally, municipalities can't make donations to private nonprofit corporations unless, like Next, it's something that the city, the village rather itself could have done and it is using Next instead
I see.
to provide that service. So it would probably be okay.
Okay.
There's some kind of reminder that we could include, and we'll do that.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll run it by you, Dirk, to make sure that it's lawful.
Yeah, because there's a written contract
Mhm.
in existence,
Correct.
talking about that, those services, it's a little more flexible for us.
Perfect. Any other questions?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
man.
Hire
Appreciate
one
it.
and go home.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm carrying this
We've been together too long to be done.
Yeah.
Have a great night, everybody.
You
Thank
too.
for your
Thanks so
time.
much, Brent.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Next, we are joined by PFM/Dickinson Wright about road financing. Bill, would you
Yeah,
like to
just
introduce this?
exactly, a little bit of a summary, as I kind of alluded, talking about the engagement letter a little bit earlier on. Tonight, we have two individuals. We have Brody Killian from PFM Financial Advisors, and we also have Eric McLaughlin from Dickerson Wright, who is bond counsel. The reason why I brought these two gentlemen in to give council a little bit of a summary and overview of different financial proposals. We're looking at a lot of them as things start to come together. As you know, we're pulling together the SAD. We pulled together, we have an estimated number for cost from HRC. One of the things that I sat down and started thinking about and talking with both President Blackburn and Ken is, all right, we're going to go forward based upon the recommendation for the loan through the SIB. However, I was always taught, that's fine, but what's your plan B should that loan not be approved at the amount that we need or that we're asking for, and that, by the way, that application is going to be submitted, I'm going to submit it tonight, tomorrow morning. Actually, tonight. Tomorrow I have cataract surgery on my other eye. But in any event, for Plan B, I wanted to start to look at what other opportunities and avenues of financing and funds that we have in order to complete the road project. So I reached out to PFM. They're very well-renowned throughout the nation. They do this as our fiduciary, as our fiduciary as bond advisors and financial advisors. And I think that it has been brought up in the past, maybe even Dirk had mentioned it in prior meetings, that for bond counsel, Dickerson Wright is, again, one of the top firms that are engaged in order for bonds portion issuance. What I want to just say is Brody's going to go through some options. Again, everything is not cast in stone because there's still a lot of moving parts, but I wanted to give council a viewpoint and summary of various options and maybe hybrids of which specific way we can go based upon what we get approved for on the loan, which was the recommendation 5 from the Roads Committee. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brody.
And just to be clear, Bill, the loan application you're doing tonight
Yes, I'm going to
is going to
submit
be
it.
for $2 million
Yes.
for 10 years?
Yes,
Okay,
that's correct.
thank you.
And we'll see what happens. If they come back, we've already, I've had
'Cause
conversations.
that's the maximum, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've had conversations with SIB. Brody and actually Eric have also, I was out having my first eye done. They had a meeting with Jessica Pierce at SIB because they wanted to dig into it. One of the things is, as a village, we cannot enter into a line of credit or a conventional loan. We can't do that. The ways that we do it are cash on hand, through the SIB loan, which they were vetting to make sure that we are able to accept it and what the terms and conditions are, because we originally thought, all right, it says loan, but maybe behind the scenes, because PFM also works very closely with the state of Michigan on bond issuances, so they thought, okay, it may be presented as a loan up front, but behind the scenes it's actual bond, and there may have things that have to still be done, so they wanted to vet that out. And then the other way, obviously, is capital improvement bonds, which they brought to my attention as another form, an avenue of being able to finance projects.
Well, thank you, Bill, and it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Brody Killian. I'm a director with PFM. I live right down the road here in Beverly Hills, and my parents live in Bingham Farms. And so I spend a lot of time in this community. So I've been around this area for many years, and I told my parents, who are in Florida, that I was going to the village to raise your taxes. That's not true. That is not true, but they kind of chuckle out of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, in all seriousness, it's a pleasure to be here. Eric is attorney with Dickinson Wright. You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Madam President, members of the council, thanks for having me here. I'm a partner with the Dickinson Wright's Public Finance Group. I've been a bond attorney for about 15 years now, and it's been a pleasure to be here tonight and answer any questions you have about the legal process required to potentially issue capital improvement bonds if needed.
And and I'll walk that statement back earlier, because there is no plan to raise taxes here. And what we were brought here tonight to do is talk about the options. And there's been a lot of work that's been put into this already by your citizens and this board, and you're kind of at the impasse now of, well, how do we put together the most appropriate and cost-effective financing options? So what we've put together here in your packet, and I'll run through this pretty quickly here, is just, in our mind, a list of the key action steps that are in front of you now as you look at, how do we finance this? So what we've already determined, based upon the meetings that you've had and our review of the engineer's report, is that phase one is estimated to cost $3,765,000. Based upon the HRC engineering report, the plan is to try to have these funds in hand by May, and a construction period of June to October of '25. So as we built out our strategy for you and looking at the options and ultimately a very rough timeline of these different financing mechanism kind of options, we wanted to take that into account. The other work that we've done here with Bill over the last couple of months is just to confirm the capital payment sources. So these are the revenue that are available to pay the debt service on the bonds. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And then we want to, in the event that you move forward with, I believe it was proposal 5, and the SAD, the Special Assessment District, there's a process that goes along with that. And so I believe your local council, Dirk, will be a very important part to make sure that as you potentially move forward with that process, that you follow all the appropriate steps. And then we look at identifying those capital funding sources. So not the revenue to pay for those, but the different, I like to call them buckets of money that we're gonna need to pull from to finance these projects. And so we've identified what we believe to be the 3 key options, which is the state infrastructure bank loan, potential cash contribution, and then if there's a gap, you wanna look at the other low-cost options. And in your case, that may be a capital improvement bond. And we can talk more about why that may be the case and why that bond structure might give you the most flexibility. And so, in order to kind of meet these timelines, we wanted to initiate the SIB application process, which we started to work on last week after vetting the program with Eric. Pretty straightforward process. We've turned over a draft to Bill, and he's gonna move forward with that. And then should you move forward with the potential issuance of a bond, there's authorization and processes going along with that, and then closing up the different financing options, and then moving into the construction phase.
Brody, can I interrupt you just for a minute?
Yes, sir.
We have copies here of your PowerPoint presentation. Does anybody want one to follow along?
Sure.
I see you looking at your phone there.
Yeah, much easier to look
It's
at
the
this.
same as what's.
Yeah, right. but
Might be
it's just-
easier, and if you
yeah.
wanna take notes,
Does
on
anybody-
a copy.
Does anybody else need one?
I've got one, thank you.
Okay,
Pass it down. Brody?
Do you want one? I-
Brody,
Yes.
just clarification, 4B,
Thank you.
cash contribution, can you define that?
Yeah, so we consider this to be any type of funds on hand
Okay.
that may have been set aside or earmarked by
Yeah.
the village. It could come from, we'll call it your Act 51 revenues that may have built up over time into a fund balance or general fund, but
Right.
ultimately it's fund balance that has been either set aside or perhaps already existing within your budget that you might look to use as a one-time contribution. I'm gonna jump ahead here because I wanna say first that this visual I put together is not, to scale. But I thought it would be helpful just to give you all kind of a perception of where we are in this process and why we're kind of at this critical impasse with the financing options. So you can see here, there's been a lot of work that you've done, and it maybe started before this. But just as a general concept of the different work that you've been doing, you've gone through your public roads committee work over the summer. The village council finance action as it relates, I believe, to the 1 mil and maybe some other discussions that you've had. And then you've had your engineering design review and then ultimately the work that they'll do with construction oversight. But now we're getting into this kind of how do we finance and developing this finance plan. And what I want to point out is you have a number of things kind of overlaying each other here. So we're working on a parallel path with different options here. The first, and always in any situation where we're raising money for capital improvement projects, is we want to get the cheapest money we can get. Free money first if we can, through grants, through the federal or state outlets. And then if there's low interest loans like the SIV. And then obviously maintaining the appropriate steps that you would take in the event if you did go forward with a special assessment. Construction procurement, as that layers in here, is important to kind of finalize your final budget. And then ultimately, if there is a bond sale needed to fund this, to plug the gap, how that would layer in here prior to the construction phase. So moving back to bond options. So you're a very unique municipality in that you have no debt outstanding. To my knowledge, I don't know that you've ever issued debt. My records, as I went back into the 80s, I didn't see anything that we considered to be traditional publicly offered debt. You might have taken out some loans along the way, but from what I gathered, I didn't see anything out there. So the role that the municipal advisor plays along with bond counsel is to try to find what is the appropriate statute that would give you, in our opinion, the best flexibility to raise funds if that ends up being the case, and we'll talk more about that. So what we are recommending as far as the bond statute or the bond mechanism that we believe gives you the best option is the capital improvement bond. And a capital improvement bond is kind of a catch-all, and that it allows you to pledge more than just one particular revenue stream to back the bond payment. And there are some steps, legal steps, that we need to go through. Do you want to speak to some of those?
Yeah.
In the event that we do move forward here.
Yeah, so Brody's done a nice job putting together a slide here with all the various options that have been considered. In the state of Michigan, general obligation bonds come in basically two flavors. You've got voted unlimited tax general obligation bonds. You put the question of issuing a bond in a certain amount for a certain amount of time to the voters and see if they approve. And then you levy taxes without limit as to rate or amount. In other words, an amount sufficient to pay the debt service coming due. Or you can take advantage of a statute under the Revised Municipal Finance Act, which allows you to publish a notice of intent to issue bonds starting a 45-day referendum period, during which if you receive a qualifying petition for referendum, then you would go to an election. But if you do not receive a qualifying petition, you've acquired the jurisdiction or the authority to proceed to issue bonds without an election. So that is the statute that we're recommending. It allows bonds to be issued after that 45-day referendum period without a qualifying petition filed for basically any purpose that's a capital improvement. So that's why it provides the most flexibility. In order to repay a capital improvement bond, the village will be required to pledge its limited tax, full faith, and credit to make the payments when they're due. And that just means that you will make the payments out of your existing authorized tax levy without raising taxes beyond those existing authorized limits. So that's basically the nutshell version of general obligation bonds in the state of Michigan, and the recommended option here, capital improvement bonds, limited tax general obligation bonds.
And we want to point out that we did look at other options. You know, we always want to evaluate the whole spectrum of financing options, if you will. And one of them is a special assessment bond, and that's done in other communities where you can borrow against those future special assessment revenues, but there's limitations on that, and it's usually limited to just that particular revenue stream. And so when you're limited, perhaps there's not enough revenue being generated from a special assessment, you need to look at revenue options. And then interestingly, our friends from Next in the city of Birmingham were in here, are just talking about the other option, which is voted unlimited tax general obligation bonds, which Eric talked about as well. So we wanna make sure that we cover, well, what is your limit as far as like your statutory authorization for the issuance of debt? And I will jump ahead to that here before I go back to the State Infrastructure Bank overview. But looking at your legal debt margin based upon your, a couple different calculations here to point out. You're limited to 10% of the village's SEV. That's for total debt, but then for your capital improvement bonds, you're limited to 5% of your SEV. So since that's what we're talking about here, your statutory limitation would be just over 13 million of capital improvement bonds that you could issue. So going back to the State Infrastructure Bank, and so here's a little bit more background about it. This was, you know, a program that was brought to light and, well, it was founded in, I think, the mid-90s. The Michigan Department of Michigan Department of Transportation, they coordinate and handle all the application and loan servicing. Eligible borrowers are pretty much any local government that has Act 51 revenues. Projects can kind of run the gamut of infrastructure, and eligible expenses, as we've laid out here, can include both engineering, construction, and pretty much any stage of a proposed construction project. The maximum loan is $2 million, as we talked about earlier. Your max loan term is 20 years. They obviously like to limit that term based upon the useful life of the asset. The current interest rate on that is 3.25%. And they will look at eligible revenues beyond just Act 51 revenues. So they'll look at general fund revenues, TIF revenues, assessment fees. If there's federal revenue or other state sharing, they'll look at that. The application process is pretty straightforward. We should hear within 30 days of that being submitted if we've been approved and for how much. And then depending upon how much you've been awarded, if it's less than 500,000, you should have those funds dispersed within 6 weeks. If it's over 500,000, it would be up to about 12 weeks. We've taken those two dates into consideration when we built out your master calendar. I think it's important, based upon our research, the average loan since it started in the late 90s was, I think, about 867,000, and the average term is just under, I think, 9 years. Okay, so here's the projected revenues for the available for debt service based upon the information that we've pulled. And again, here, we want to make sure that this is based upon preliminary figures, and we know that you have a process that you still want to go through. But we based upon 173 parcels at $500 per parcel, which would generate just over 86,500 in revenue annually. And then we have your Act 51 revenue that we've identified as a surplus, and that's generating 60,000 annually. And then you have your 1 mil, which we've identified estimating at 217,000 this year, and we're growing that at 1% a year. So that's the annual growth rate based upon tax value, a very conservative rate. And that generates your total revenue ongoing over a 10-year term that you could potentially use as revenue for debt service.
Can you go back one slide?
Yes, sir.
Just for clarification, there's either something wrong with your totals line, or I don't understand what it's totaling.
So our calculation should be a totaling of each of those lines here. So we might have missed a...
Your total SA revenue line is not carried forward. The grand total of 865,000. Is that what you're looking at, Eric?
No, I'm looking at, for instance, the Act 51 revenue has a total of $2.16 million.
You're correct. That's not...
And there's 1160,000, which is 660,000.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
so
there's
this
an
one,
error
because
here.
there's these are big numbers,
Yes,
and we
sir.
need to make sure they're correct.
sir.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that we correct that.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
It's easy to correct if you know, but it's
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is a combination of these two, and what we didn't do is carry them forward, so I'll make sure that gets updated.
Okay.
But I'm confident, based upon this total number, that this is the appropriate number as far as total revenues, but we will make sure we get that updated. Thank you. Yes.
Brody, these numbers, this money is without the bond.
Correct. This is just revenues that, in talking with Bill and Ken, that in looking at some of the minutes of prior meetings, that appear to be potentially available, right? That you could, we feel comfortable as a council to earmark for debt service
Right.
payments, whether it be for a SIB loan or for a bond. And this obviously can change, and the way that our model is set up, you know, we can modify these, but these are only the three revenue sources that we believe, and based upon the work that your committee has done and other discussions that we've had, that you would feel comfortable at this point, you know, setting aside, earmarking for debt service. Now, if you do go forward and issue a limited tax general obligation bond through a capital improvement bond, you will be committing your full general fund behind that. So in the event some of these revenues decreased, it would become a first budgetary obligation of your general fund budget. So those revenues too would need to be available to pay for debt service if these didn't generate enough.
Do you have that number?
Of what the debt service is?
What you're projecting what it would be?
Yes, that's on the next slide. I can show you some of those scenarios. And part of our model backs into trying to figure out, you know, a surplus and deficit for each of the different scenarios. So, here's our 5 different scenarios that we wanted to run, because as Eric pointed out earlier, we did go for the $2 million loan, but we don't know what we're gonna get. So we thought, well, let's run some scenarios here to try to figure out, you know, what different options generate an annual surplus based upon these revenue streams that we've identified. Also take into account the potential of cash that we'd be injecting in phase 1, and knowing that you have a phase 2 down the road too, that you're not, you know, setting yourself up so that you're short for phase 2. So quickly, option 1 and option 2 assume that you would get a $2 million loan from the state infrastructure bank. State infrastructure bank, make sure I change that. Capital improvement bonds, you can see the difference between those two. Costs of issuance are associated with a bond issue. And then funds on hand is a cash contribution. And then we have estimated construction fund earnings of $7,829 through the life of this bond project. And then we add all those up, and that gets to your total construction cost of $3,765,000. And so below there, in those two scenarios, you can see some of the key summary statistics. We're assuming a 10-year term for both all of the loans and bonds. The state infrastructure bank loan of 3.25, then the capital improvement bond estimate you'll see. And then we're looking at totals of the interest costs for both of those. But then more importantly, if you move down to the estimated average annual payment, that's the number I believe Trustee Machigian you were referring to.
Right.
This is what we would estimate the average annual payment to be in those two scenarios if you were successful in getting a $2 million loan. Now, what I want to point out here is that we tried to give you an estimate of what that annual surplus or deficit would be. So my point in kind of bringing you to those two scenarios is that if you only put in, Well, in the scenario two, we're not putting in any cash, okay? You would, in that situation, you'd be running a deficit. So what we wanted to point out here is that there has to be a combination of some form of cash, SIV loan amount, and probably, depending upon how much cash you're willing to put in, there's gonna need to be some type of gap funded with an issuance of a bond, if that's what you decide to do. But that's up to all of you, we can make a recommendation. But my point here is that I wanna point out that this line again, across all of the options, the estimated average annual payment of $293,000 and $455, $459, that drives the estimated annual surplus and deficit based upon the prior page's total revenues.
That's why I think this model's wrong too,
Okay?
because you've got the wrong numbers on the prior. You're basing this off of much too high numbers. Much too high.
Well, I think these numbers are an error here, sir.
I agree, and that's
But
why,
not
these
these
are wrong.
ones.
Oh, yeah, they're wrong too.
Oh,
They don't
okay.
add up to $12.3 million.
No, I'm saying, I think these,
Individually, they're correct.
I think these are correct.
Right.
These ones here are not accurate.
Agreed.
You are correct. The bottom ones
So
are
I just,
picking.
but if this financing alternative model's picking up the total, and I don't know that it is,
I
but
don't
if it
believe- it
is,
is
then this
not.
was wrong too.
It is not.
Okay.
No, I know that for sure. But you make a great point. This total column, I'm not sure why it's picking that up. I'm not sure what happened here. Why did it disappear? But anyway, the average annual debt service and that surplus is being calculated off of the total. But Eric, you're right. Those total numbers at the bottom are not accurate. Not sure what
I'm
happened.
getting total revenue of 3,000,000,
Yeah, That's about right.
400,000
Yeah,
plus,
there's something around 4 million.
rather than
I'm not
12
sure.
million.
And I can fix that. And I'm not sure if I'm able to even pull this Excel
So it's gonna
model
take 10
up,
years
but-
to pay off phase one, basically,
Correct.
without,
Well, I mean,
with
we
this
can-
debt service.
we can look at other options as well, but,
Yeah, I don't know. It's connected there, right?
yeah.
Try it again.
There you go.
No, you're on.
Yay.
Okay, so Eric, you, make a great point here, and I'll have a chat with some people tomorrow about this. But here's the beauty of our analysts set this up right. Not sure why this isn't picking that up. But, let me just change this, so you get to see this live in action. Not sure why, but nonetheless,
Yeah, at some point,
it needs to be fixed.
yeah, it needs to be fixed, and Bill, you need to have that model.
Yeah. So this is, 4,035,000
Yeah, that's right. That makes sense, that makes sense,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we'll get that cleaned up for you. So back to the, take those on and we'll get that
So
fixed.
just to go back to what you stated originally, this is only covers phase one,
Correct.
so we'll have to go through this 2 more times.
Well, phase one,
Or
the
one
way
more
we
time.
understand it, is a combination of SAD one and SAD two.
Okay.
That's correct, yeah.
So, if we look at option 3, and we wanted to give you guys different flavors of how you.
I hate to keep doing this,
No.
but I was part of the roads committee, so I'm pretty
Yes,
familiar
sir.
with these numbers.
Absolutely.
So if we go back to your first option, you've got funds on hand of $1.32 million.
Yes.
How did you determine that that's what the village would be willing to put in?
I think that was a number that we pulled from one of the reports along the way. I
Because
believe in,
the number that we're willing to put in is much higher than that.
Yeah, we had 2.7
Right.
available.
Exactly.
Unless there was a, report that I did to say, all right, based upon that though, we know that's for the entire process of what we have. It wasn't considering, north of 13 and south of
No, I
13.
do agree, yeah.
And that's when the original, I think, committee was looking at
Divided up
1.5
one or the
for
other,
it.
okay.
And then I needed to make sure that I can't just, I didn't feel comfortable without having funds set aside that's available for normal operations and anything that should happen for sinkholes or anything like that. So we sat down, I sat down with our auditor, we backed out, and we came and said, okay, 1.3 is one of the numbers that we have as a stake in the ground, and then I start looking at, okay, what is our spread of what we're currently, and I know that interest rates change, but based upon a 3.25% versus what we're currently yielding, I'd rather keep whatever funds that we can that are at a greater rate than what we would be paying out. So when I spoke with Brody, what we did was, he said, we're gonna do various options to look at it, because we still don't, you know, we looked at 500, we talked, there was mention about 500 versus 250 on the SAD, and a lot of that wasn't settled. So he just said, let me run some scenarios, 1 through 5, we'll take a look at them. Nothing is set in stone yet, because there's still a lot of moving parts, but this gives us a flavor for what some of the options are.
Okay, I think that's, I understand it now. But somehow, you're about to do an application for the SIB loan, and in my opinion, it's only my opinion, you should do it, that's a good thing to do.
Right, exactly,
But
especially
to
at that
consider a bond at this point in time would be a very bad idea, in my opinion.
Well, here's my take.
Okay.
I think that what happens if the opportunity, or not, the approval comes, but it's not for 2 million, say it's like all right, 500,000,
Yeah.
we can approve you for 500,000. Then we have a gap, and I don't want a gap per se on that gap of not only the funds, but timing in order to provide us to move forward with some other, we have to have 45 days that we have to publish before we can even think about going towards the bond. So I don't want
So
to
you're
wait.
not gonna do anything on the bond right now?
No, but what I didn't want to do was, I didn't want to wait till the decision comes from SIB and then start the 45 days, because that puts us 45 days in arrears when, you know, if we want to start during the construction season, we're going to have to run them concurrently. So there's nothing that we obligated to. Even if SIB comes back and they said you're approved, that doesn't mean that we have to sign. We still have to have signed the documents for the loan, and you all have to approve that. You all have to approve anything with any types of funds going in and out. What I wanted to do was make sure that that stop clock that starts, that timer, we wanted to make sure that I have both Plan A, which is SIB, and the option as a safety valve to go to bond if we had to, if there was a gap that needed to be plugged or filled.
You know, have we entertained the thought of only doing the work we can afford to pay for when we have the money to pay for it? Like,
Well,
what we get from the SIB, that's with what we have in our accounts. And maybe it's not all the roads north of 13. I mean,
No, that is absolutely an option, and it's, you know, you can scale it back. You can postpone and say, we're not ready to venture off to do any of this until we have more funds built up, or we have different funding sources. Or, like you said, all right, we don't do everything north. We will only do portion. Now, one of the things that I did remember Brad saying is that, okay, you have a contractor, they're not gonna wanna, you know, it's not as attractive to them. They like to come in, and I think he said they just wanna lay the asphalt and get it done all at once. So if you call them for just one road here and one road
Costs
there,
more money.
they've gotta bring the equipment there, then we gotta wait, costs go up, then they have to bring the equipment back again, instead of just doing it all in one full swoop.
I just wanna know from my perspective, that we're not committing to do anything on a bond tonight or for the foreseeable future, other than maybe say, we'll sign some document that says, Eric, we'll get the business if we decide we need the bond.
Can you define foreseeable future?
Yeah, there's no, we'll have plenty of money.
No, can you define what you mean by that,
Next 2
foreseeable
years.
future? What's that?
Next 2 years.
Oh, okay.
I personally don't think we will need the money from a bond,
Mhm.
if at all,
mhm.
for about 2 years. That's my calculation.
And Bill is saying, if the SIB loan is less than what we ask,
Uh,
How do we fill the gap?
Well, you're going to, then the council will have to decide if the only thing we're going to put in is the $1.32 million or the $2.7 million to fill the gap.
We do have the money
We
in the
do.
bank.
The point is we have the money, yeah.
But
So
if
why would you take out?
Put in the 2.7, then what happens to the next phase?
Well, when we get to the next phase in 2 years, then we'll do a bond issue if that's necessary.
But to take
But
out
why would
that
you take
debt
out a
now-
bond if you got the
Yeah,
money? You're just
exactly.
gonna be
Well,
throwing
I
in
think
money away.
what Bill is trying to do is just present options. Like you said, we're not locked in, we're not even locked into the
No, that's
SIV
fine.
loan.
Yeah, because it hasn't even been approved, correct?
Well,
Right,
that's
it
all I'm
hasn't been
trying-
approved, but,
I appreciate the bond discussion, in my opinion, is way premature, we don't need to be having a bond discussion right now, but that's okay, that's
But
my opinion.
others might feel like
I
bond
agree.
is a good
That-
idea.
That's right,
And we also don't
No.
know about the SAD.
I agree.
So we have to have public hearings. I mean, we
Yeah.
might not do an SAD at all.
Um,
We could, I mean, we might hear from the public during a public hearing, and people might, from the public roads, might feel strong that everybody should be contributing, and we might not.
Well,
I mean, we don't
that's
know
if you
that
wanna-
yet
that's-
either.
Lisa, the council's already approved this, you're talking about taking it to, you're gonna have to have public hearings, I agree, but are you gonna actually take it to a vote if you hear people that dissent on what you've already agreed to?
No, we would have to just borrow more money.
Okay.
You know,
I
and
just,
then-
all
and then we
I want
still-
to satisfy the discussion from my side is that we're not committing to a bond right now.
Right.
My understanding
Because I'm one vote.
is no, we're not committing to an actual bond issuance.
Okay.
Dirk, I'm sorry, you were.
I was just gonna say, if I understand what I read, that nothing, the first action tonight they would approve the engagement letter. So that if indeed you did go down the Bond Road, you will have tickets to drive lined up. And then potentially in January, you would adopt a resolution giving the notice of intent, which starts the 45-day clock running, but doesn't bind you having to go out to issue bonds. Is that?
That's correct.
Close to accurate?
Yeah, and if I may add,
If we don't need a bond for 2 years, but we are signing an engagement letter to do bond work, we're committing money that we don't need to commit for 2 years?
not necessarily. So the way, we can talk about this on the engagement letter item, but the way bond counsel services traditionally work is we advise the issuer as to the legal procedures for authorizing and issuing bonds, and document the transaction. And when the bonds are issued and closed and you've received your money, it's at that time that we present a bill for the agreed upon fee, so that you're not getting monthly statements from us expecting payment in return. That's not how the practice typically works. And to reiterate what Dirk said, nothing tonight is going to commit the village to issuing any bonds in any amount or at all. It's merely the presentation plus my engagement letter are to present the village with the options and possible routes for financing what our understanding is that you all want to do, and at the same time meeting kind of the dual track preparation that Mr. Patton has laid out, so that when we get to the point where the SIB has either approved or disapproved the loan, we can proceed forward with that time, either with a bond or without a bond. Then to piggyback on what Dirk said, at that time in January, the village council will be presented with a resolution approving the form and publication of a notice of intent. You can approve that and publish the notice of intent, and even let it expire, and you still haven't obligated yourself to issue bonds at any amount or at all. You can just completely abandon it at that point if you want. And then, once the referendum period expires, the village council will be presented again with a formal bond authorizing resolution, which at that time would be the point where the village actually sets the parameters within which bonds can be issued. And you still aren't obligated to issue at that point. After that, you would publish a notice of sale and offer the bonds for sale. And the only point at which you obligate yourself to issue bonds is once you've published the notice of sale, you've opened the bids, and you've awarded the bids. At that point, you're under contract to sell bonds. So it's a long process before you're actually obligated to actually issue bonds and have to repay them. Now, we wouldn't let you get to that point, and then where there's a question about whether or not you want to pull back out, because at that point you will have caused reputational harm to the village. So we won't let you get to the point of noticing a sale of bonds and selling bonds and
We
then
don't
not
need- never
selling.
mind,
So is there a difference in cost depending on where we go, who the source is for this work?
Mhm.
Yeah,
There
so
is.
how do we know we're getting the best deal?
So, well, first of all, if I just go back to the summary of financing alternatives, I do wanna point out that, as you kind of move from left to right, these other options, as a way to kind of do the economics on if this mixture of funding sources is making sense, we've come up with this annual surplus and deficit. Now, Eric presents a new option, right? Which would be funding any balance, like in the event of doing $1 million state infrastructure bank loan, rather than doing the bonds, obviously you would fill the gap there with the additional cash. So, as it relates to the most optimal way of financing a project, we like to work with our clients to exhaust the cheapest resources first. So, in your case, we've identified the state infrastructure bank,
Right.
which truthfully, their 3.25% interest rate is slightly lower than market rate right now, but it's not, in my mind, a low interest rate option. It's a market rate option. But what it has is a very quick process relative to others to get your money, and there's no cost of issuance incurred, like professional fees or a credit rating or things of that nature. So when you look at the other alternatives, besides cash, we try to evaluate it based upon how do we get to the bond investors in that most efficient manner. And typically, we see that done through what's called a public offering. And in a public offering, you have a credit rating involved, there's an underwriter's discount, those costs can kind of add up on top of each other, right? So what you're leaning into is your professional partners to ensure, in our case, your municipal advisor is signing a contract to serve as your fiduciary, that we have to then provide you a recommendation that that was indeed the best rate that you could get on that given day. There's multiple options to get to that capital, and we will help your team to evaluate which is the best one. The other option that tends to have lower cost of issuance up front is if we go to a local bank through what we call a private placement. So a local bank might be interested in, rather than going out to a public offering, maybe a local bank wants to purchase those bonds into their own inventory. But to your point, Eric, it is premature from the standpoint of you're not making that, recommendation here. But if I could jump to, this is a draft financing schedule. And the point I was trying to make earlier with your kind of this visual of these options kind of running along the same time. If you do hear from the state infrastructure bank that the amount that you were hoping to get is lower, and then you guys have this discussion about how much cash do you really want to put into the deal, if we don't start the clock on the potential of issuing debt, bonds, then it could slow down your construction process. So what we've prepared here is kind of an overlapping of all of these different calendars, so that ultimately the goal here is to get you the monies you need by the middle of May so that your contractors can start to do the work. So I think Eric covered that quite well as it relates to what you're not committing to. But if we don't have this conversation today, and or at least throw these options out, then, there could be a pinch point down the road where now you're kind of wishing you would have at least had those conversations sooner. So, I think at this point, this probably is a good place to maybe pause and ask if there's questions, or Eric, if you wanted to clarify.
Yep, as on this draft schedule, I wanted to just emphasize that it's a draft, and it shows kind of the beginning and the end, and then there are several dates in there that may shift somewhat as you get into the process if there's going to be a bond issue. So This is just kind of a general idea as we stand here today, on December 16th, what the timeline might look like going to May.
Could to be clear again, there's responsible parties, BC, Bond Council, PFM, as you guys. V would be village, I presume.
Yes,
E would be engineering company, I presume.
engineer, correct.
Anybody else?
S is the state.
State, okay.
And I'll be honest, you know, we hadn't had a chance to talk with Dirk or and his responsibilities in reviewing your charter and making sure the special assessment hearing process. I just layered in a couple hearings here,
Yeah.
just to kind of give you an idea that has to be going, you know, on a parallel path with the SIV process, with the potential of issuing bonds. So, you know, depending upon how the outcome of this conversation goes and the direction that you give the administrative staff, we would then work with Dirk to make sure that we layer in the appropriate special assessment hearing dates in this master calendar, should you decide to do that.
In your previous experience in working with municipalities, are we working in too short of a time frame to push an elephant uphill?
It depends on what the elephant is.
Pretty big one right now. There's a lot of lines here, a lot of meetings, a lot of approvals in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I think the number of lines are typically not this many lines in the timeline, but it's because there are a number, there are different processes happening at the same time, 3 total processes, the SIV, potential SAD, and potential bond are all kind of layered into this one chart here, which is producing more lines than you would normally see on just those.
Which of those processes is most vulnerable?
I don't know if I'd use the word vulnerable, but the one that usually takes the most time and effort is the SAD process.
Would you, the SAD, special assessment?
The SAD process, not SAD,
SAD.
the special assessment district process, just because it has statutorily required hearings and notice procedures that have to be met.
We don't need that for the first phase, do we? 'Cause we've
Yeah, you'll
already
have to
done
do
it.
hearings.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they'll take it.
you'll have to do hearings.
Oh, Geez, I thought we
Yeah.
did that, we didn't have an election. So, tell me, do we have to do, like for bids, for construction, we need 3 bids? Do we need to have 3 proposals for financing?
You mean to hire bond counsel?
Yeah,
No. It's a unique service, so no, the answer is
oh, the source of the bond, who's gonna write, we don't need to make sure that it's, okay.
As far as the source of the bond goes, this timeline assumes if bonds were the option that the village wants to pursue, this timeline assumes that the bonds would be sold by competitive process. So there'd be a published notice of sale, bids would be received at an appointed time, and the bidder's lowest true interest cost would be awarded as a matter of state law at that point. So you would have done, so to speak, the procurement process for selling the bonds at that point.
So, when I look at the summary of financing alternatives, and I see the cost of issuance, is that what you charge for the bond?
That is an estimate of what all of the costs are. So it would be PFM's fee, and they're conservative, so they're likely gonna be higher in this model than what would happen in the real world. PFM's fee, bond counsel fee, a credit rating fee. If we decided to go that route, we would engage either Standard & Poor's, probably Standard & Poor's or Moody's, their fee, any additional treasury fees that you have to pay. And then there's also an underwriter's discount that in a competitive sale or the other alternative where you would hire an investment bank up front, there's fees that they charge you. So that's why the state infrastructure bank loan becomes such a really valuable tool for you to
Very
look at.
attractive.
Yeah.
Because there's no costs,
Yeah.
right? Now, we think that we will deliver you a tremendous service in helping you to find the cheapest capital, the most effective capital. But back to your question on, you know, I think of it as you're bringing in your professional team to help you to access the capital markets and the role that PFM plays as your municipal advisor in that fiduciary duty, not only are we gonna help you find the best capital, the cheapest capital, but we help you determine what is the best route to get into the bond market. And so typically, an issue of your size will be done through a competitive sale process, as Eric said. And we would put it out to bid on a certain date and time, and any bank has the ability to bid on it. So that is your transparent process to the taxpayers that gives you that sleepability at night to know that we put it out for bid, and we got a bunch of people to bid on it, and the winner was based upon the lowest cost.
So we still have to get bids. We don't even know what that's gonna be yet.
Right, but, I mean, that's just not,
Well, we have a not to, we have a not to exceed number
Right.
from HRC, but you're right, you still gotta
Yeah.
get bids.
Yeah, and then I think, I like Eric's comment that the bond is not needed immediately. So I'd rather get started on this without having to incur these costs.
And that will be the case as long as SIB approves the loan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
What
that's
is
why I
the-
like what you're bringing up, is that, okay, now we have an alternative, as you said, in case at all,
Plan B.
gets Plan B, gets
Correct.
hit by the bus.
yeah, I think it's important to research all of our options, and like I say, there's no guarantee that the money's
Right.
coming from SIB, and if we wait to see what we get, and we don't get what we
Ask for. Mm-hmm.
ask for or what we need, we're really putting ourselves behind the 8 ball to start the process of the bond. So, to have that information, I appreciate you coming ahead,
Mhm.
to have that information ahead of time and have these
Yeah.
conversations, I think, even if we don't go down this road, that we have that
We know.
information and we made a decision based on all of the information that we were given, I think is critical.
Right.
We do have a comment from the audience.
I have a question.
Okay.
Since this is option B that we're looking at, or a possible option B, once we sign that letter of engagement, when does the hourly financial clock start running?
Well, so typically with bond counsel services, while I am required to track my time internally with my firm, the way that we bill the village is one time at bond closing
But
for the agreed
when does
upon
the
fee.
clock start running? I know you're gonna send it at the end. When does the clock start running financially? When you
mean in
keep
terms of
track-
retainment?
It's a set fee.
Yeah, it's a percentage. I have quoted a flat fee
I
based on
didn't-
a formula, yeah.
Do we know what that flat fee is?
Yes.
Yeah, it's in the letter. So I quoted a flat fee.
Page 3.
and I don't bill
Bottom.
the village
The letter we just
hourly.
got here now?
I don't bill
Yeah.
the
And you don't-
Oh, yeah, somehow I got both of them, sorry about that, Jeff.
Too much paper here.
So once they sign the letter of engagement, financially, where is that put then? If they don't use you after that at all?
If they sign the engagement letter tonight and then they don't do anything further, then we wouldn't present them with the bill.
Yeah. But I think, it would be short-sighted to think that the value that we bring to the table here is not just in the form of our, potential a transaction. What we also are bringing to the table here is education. And so, to Eric, you made a great point earlier. Well, we may not need a bond for a couple of years. Well, I'll tell you what, your group right now, you guys are even more prepared now for the potential of that. Because you've taken the time to put this on your agenda and evaluate options. And you happen to have two very distinguished firms in front of you that are very interested in working with you. But also part of the work that Eric and I do is educate. And so for us, if we go and walk away and you never do anything, as long as we feel that we've given you the information that you need to be successful in funding your road project, there might be an opportunity for us to come back down the road. So for us, we feel like there's value in that part of this process as well. And that, you need to know what your options are. You don't issue bonds all the time, and if you even decide to, but the more critical component of this is, how do you finance the project? What are my options? And that's not something people necessarily do all the time on the local government side. So we just appreciate you giving us that opportunity as well to be here in front of you, to provide you with some background.
A couple of comments. One, first comment I would make is when we've had one meeting here in council chambers with Brody and your counterpart Carrie. And one of the questions that I have is, the meter's not running, correct? I ask that of Dirk all the time when I talk to him, meter's not running, right? So I wanna make sure, and their answer was, no, the meter is not running. We're looking at providing the education, giving you the options. Once we actually, the rubber meets the road and we start to engage in doing what you want, should you move forward with a bond, that's when their engagement letter with their fees is put in it. The same for Eric. I've asked him when we were on the call too, your meter's not running. The answer is no. The second comment I wanted to make is, I'm thinking ahead of saying, okay, this is phase one, looking at everything that we have on hand, we know that we're gonna have to do phase two, and it could be much more expensive than phase one, depending what we do with Bristol, right? So I wanna set up ahead of time, again, knowing and getting familiarized with the council, right? Within 3 years, I'm sure that we're gonna try to get that, embark upon that within the 3 years. Well, I need to start building a relationship and understanding how the bond process works, because I've never went through an issuance of bonds. And it's very likely that we may need that form in order to complete phase two of the project for the village. Not to say that, again, we're committing to it, but again, I just kind of look ahead with headlights to say, okay, we've got to get through phase one. How are we gonna do that? What's the most efficient way? And then looking at phase two, all right, phase two, it's gonna cost more, what are our options? I know we can get to it when we go on phase two, but I always wanna be a little bit more prepared and understand the process, because once you go through it once, then it's easier the second time and you have a little bit more, data points that you can point to. Okay?
May need more than two.
Yes. Correct.
2 times, yeah.
If I could speak for Brody just real briefly, I think the two of us together, in our experience working with other municipal issuers, we view our role as helping you all find the best decision for the way forward for you all, not necessarily to push a particular path. So considering all the financial aspects and the legal options, put that together with what the village's goals are, and then that's how we come up with our recommendations. It's not necessarily to push a particular path forward, it's just so that you all can make the best decision that you're most comfortable with,
Right.
in terms of delivering the project for your residents. So it's not really about a particular solution, just what the facts and circumstances of the legal and the financial and the goals of the village combined to produce.
And I know PFM as well, you were engaged with a lot of other municipalities. I think Carrie said you just did City of Southfield for, was it $100 million bond for
Correct,
roads?
we've worked with them, they had a voted road project and a number of other projects that Carrie, my managing director partner, has been involved with. And a number of other communities around, and, yeah, I mean, taking on debt is not something that should be done, without a lot of thought, and I appreciate how you guys are tackling this. I think your taxpayers are gonna be happy the way you're doing your due diligence, and Eric, I have something to share with my team when I go back, so I'll make sure our model gets corrected.
That would be good.
Yeah, and I will
Would be a
send,
good first step.
and I will send that back around to
Yes.
everyone. I'll have that to you tomorrow by
Thank you.
probably middle of the day with all that updated, so
Thank you.
you're very
It's a
welcome.
lot of work.
Oh, we're happy to do it.
Without the meter running.
One of the things I noticed in here, in that for the SIB loan, it looks as if they have results within 30 days.
Correct.
So that would then determine what we get out of there, where we go. So we
Yeah.
might know that
Right.
by next council meeting.
Oh, we have to, yeah.
Yeah,
And then
that,
we can go,
Yeah.
with further discussion, know what we wanna do at that point.
correct.
How much money do we wanna put in from the village versus what we get from there, if we need to go for more money.
Right, if there's a gap or not.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Is there a minimum amount for a bond?
No, I mean,
Okay.
we've seen small bonds, and Eric, you probably,
I've done an issue for $36,000 before, and it was a sewer project up north. It was a small project.
The
I
good
think-
news, though, is that on the smaller bonds, Eric, I think you had pointed out, the rebate portion is under 5 million. That whole more legal hoops, I guess I would refer to it as, because when you have something less than 5 million in a bond issuance,
Yeah.
there's some things that are not required, is that correct?
Yeah, so when you issue tax exempt bonds, the federal government places a kind of a dual set of regulations upon you. The three general prohibitions are that you can't issue tax exempt bonds before you need them, you can't issue more than you need, and you can't leave them outstanding longer than you need to have them to pay for your project. And in order to implement those restrictions, they have one set of regulations called the arbitrage restrictions, and they have another set that runs in parallel called the rebate regulations.
Rebate rule, right?
So you get bond proceeds, you can invest them for certain time periods at rates that are materially higher than the bond yield. But then if you earn money on that, then the rebate regulations kick in and you have to pay them back to the federal government anyways, unless you qualify for the exceptions in the rebate regulations. Now, if you issue less than $5 million in a calendar year, you typically would qualify for the small issuer exception and you wouldn't have to rebate any excess earnings. Those are all considerations that we have to look forward to once we've gotten to the point of selling bonds. And I'm going to be asking Mr. Patton to sign a non-arbitrage certificate that has all those things in it, and we can go over it at that point. But it's very premature to be talking about arbitrage and rebate this evening, so.
So two more questions. On the SIB loan, is there any prepayment penalty?
Not to our knowledge,
Okay.
but we can double check that.
And if we do a 10-year bond issue, we're stuck for 10 years though, right?
Not necessarily.
I mean, we could try to negotiate in a call feature, but typically with a 10-year bond, the normal tender or a call feature is 10 years.
Yeah.
So normally it would not be.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Brody, is a call feature more expensive? It adds to the cost of the issuance of the bond, or no?
The market it's generally acceptable to have a 10-year call feature and there's no premium to that. But if you want to start negotiating that shorter, so if you wanted to say, give yourselves the option of calling that bond back earlier with a
Yeah,
5-year, then you would be looking at paying a premium.
Are there any more questions? No.
Brings us to the engagement letter.
Right, so C is the engagement letter. This was added, do we need a vote on this?
Motion?
Just a motion.
So I'm looking for a motion for approval of the engagement letter.
No, it's only the first question.
Is there a question? I'd like to do that before the motion.
What'd you ask?
What's the question?
Well, nothing starts until we hear back on the SIB, correct? That's gonna be our determining factor
Yes.
of what path we take. So does the engagement letter need to be signed tonight,
Yes,
or after we find out what about the SIB?
because if the SIB loan is denied, then you're gonna maybe or reduce. You may have to pivot so that in January you have a resolution of notice of intent. And if you don't retain the bond counsel today, you won't have that notice of intent resolution if you wait until January to sign the engagement. Did I say it accurately?
Yes, you did.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have one more that I'd just like to put a general, you have to go out for bids.
Yeah.
Bloomfield Township is totally redoing all their roads by asphalt. And I think that might be somebody you wanna contact and see what their pricing is per load, or I don't know how they do it for asphalt. I worked in purchasing for years at Ford, I didn't do asphalt, but I saw them laying all tearing up the roads and so on, so
Yeah,
that would be a good contact.
Those roads are done, the roads you're referring to are being done via SAD.
Right. And how much are they? I think I heard
$70,000.
$70,000.
And I can vouch for that
SAD.
because I know the people that live there.
Person?
Yes, property.
Per
For
property.
15 years, yeah.
It's in between 55 and almost 70.
So they're doing special assessments?
Yes,
they're
they are.
doing bonds?
Yes, that's
Right.
correct. They don't own the roads. Townships don't own roads, and so it's a different situation.
Yeah, it's
But
private.
yes, you're correct.
Yes.
Very expensive for those folks.
Very, very
Yeah.
expensive.
Tough,
Very, very
tough hit.
controversial too.
Yep.
So at least get in my mind, in signing this guy, basically lets us have more juice, should we say, to get the SIB loan?
Gives us flexibility.
Flexibility. It doesn't give us more juice. They are gonna, SIB is going to make the determination based upon their evaluation of our village, our current financial situation, and our ability to repay. But what I wanted to do is, should that come in denied or less than what we're asking for, and there's a gap to fill, I wanted to be able to have, better on deck in order to be able to do the 45 days, should we need to move forward to plug that gap via
And
bond.
saying this doesn't cost us anything.
Nothing.
No, and we don't have to move forward with anything.
You
But
don't?
I think it's prudent for us to move now because, depending on when that notice comes back from SIB, based on what it is, Bill might need to pivot quickly and get things going. And so, although he can't commit to certain things, it allows him to start certain processes because,
The clock's running.
knock on wood, but yeah, we don't have a lot of flex time here, and if we don't have a quorum in January for some reason, and we can't meet, then we're pushing to February. So we're always trying to look ahead and sort of cover all of our bases, and, tonight is the night to sign the letter.
It is,
Right.
to approve it, yeah.
So just to go on
To
record,
approve the letter.
I'm sorry, just to go
I
on.
would like to just go on record too.
Mhm.
Bond issues are very expensive.
Yeah.
And nothing that has been discussed or worked on up to this point has included the cost of bond issues. And the village council's already agreed to a millage increase of 1, and for special assessment districts at $500 a year. To go with a bond issue, I don't think is a pivot. I think it's a several meeting discussion over whether that's the right thing to do or not. I just don't, what I
you're
really
right.
believe is you're gonna be fine, and you're not gonna need to do a bond issue. That's what I believe 99%, but not 100%.
And you're absolutely right, Eric,
Yeah.
that it would be a multiple meeting
Yeah, it has to be,
situation.
yeah.
What we're trying to do here is just put you in a position that if you need to do the bonds, you get the 45-day period running, so that that's out of the way, the referendum period's out of the way. And that doesn't bind you in January if you adopted a resolution of notice of intent. It just starts the 45-day clock running. And again, I'm not a bond counsel, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you lose nothing by having this in place, and it doesn't cost you anything.
Council will
If we
still be
don't
making
move
all the
forward,
decisions.
but we start the 45-day issuance and do those things, and we say, at the end of all of that, we're not doing bonds, what's your estimate based on a 1% on $2 million bond for your costs? What portion of that will we have paid for nothing?
Well, I've bifurcated my fee in case, because we've got the dual track, and so, let's say you decide to issue a bond, and you follow through and you go through the whole process and a bond is issued, and then there's the fee schedule, or the formulas in there for how much that would cost. And then if we get started in the process, you adopt a notice of intent resolution, publish a resolution, at that point, we're starting to do the work to prepare the issue for sale. And so if you get into that referendum period, through that referendum period, and then you decide not to go forward with the bond at that point, then I bifurcated my fee, and I would charge a lower fee if you abandon the bond issue at that point. So it would be, I believe, $4,750 at that point, if we get into the work and then decide to stop doing the work at that point.
So $5,000
Yeah.
to just have the option that if we need to pull the trigger, we'll have spent $5,000 and not do bonds.
That's correct.
That's about a worst-case scenario.
That's
for how
correct.
much- Okay.
Because
That's
like I
safety.
said, that
So
once you
that's
start the
safety valve.
process, you're starting to do other activities, not just waiting for the referendum period to expire.
Okay.
But we would have given you, a nod or whatever, we would have asked you to start the process,
Right. Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So we
That's
would have
what you'll do-
already,
That's what you'll do when you sign this agreement.
right,
But as
Well,
for,
no.
if you sign it
No.
tonight,
no,
we're waiting to see what happens with the SIB.
Okay.
Let's say you get the full 2 million, then it sounds like you may not need a bond at all.
Costs you nothing.
Then
Fine.
nothing, okay.
So then we
Yeah.
owe you zero.
Yep,
Right, yeah.
that's right.
I won't send you a bill.
We won't pay it if we get it.
Right.
No meter, no Uber fee,
Until we have.
until you
the-
get into the car.
Until we say we want to go in your direction,
Yeah,
Yes.
and we've discussed that, and
Yeah.
we're giving you the go-ahead.
yeah,
That's basically when the meter starts sticking, because that's when you start really
so to speak, yeah.
doing all the work. Now
Yeah.
we've got you into a situation that you're gonna have to get out of,
Right,
and so we're paying those fees. But right now, we're in a holding pattern. This letter is just sort of getting us ahead to make, because of the timing of all this.
so we're ready to go when we need to go.
Right.
So we may not need you for 2 or 3 years. This would still be,
Could, yeah.
Right.
Would these terms be applicable 2 or 3 years from now by signing now?
Maybe not.
We signed.
We can revisit it, but yeah, the idea is that it'll stay in place until you decide that, the project's not going forward or you're not gonna use us. So that's how it works.
We're sort of starting a relationship.
Yeah.
So if there's no other questions on it, I would like to, ask.
There are other questions. How many in this room have read all of this letter? One. You read it all? Okay.
Oh, we just got it.
We just got it, yeah.
Yeah.
We just
Yep.
got it.
Yes, I understand, you got it just today.
Yeah.
Be good if we had it like a couple days ahead of time. Oh, it's dated yesterday.
Yeah, I received it. Eric sent it to me last night.
Yeah, okay.
Did you read it, Bill?
I did, and I had Dirk review it in its entirety.
I read it too.
Okay. Okay.
Whenever it comes to contracts or anything, I don't move without getting council's opinion on what it is and what it says and fully understanding it.
Legal counsel.
Legal counsel, thank you.
Are there any more questions? Okay, then I'm gonna ask for a motion to approve the engagement letter tonight.
I will so move.
Second? I second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
In May.
So 4-3.
What did you say, in May?
No, I said no, nay.
Oh, I thought you said
Aye,
in.
nay, whatever I'm supposed to say.
In May.
No.
You have to do this again.
I
Go
think,
ahead.
I think it's 4-3.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3. All opposed?
Nay.
Jim, you didn't vote?
You're not voting.
Do I have to vote?
Yes.
Well, then I'll vote no.
Okay, motion fails.
So I would suggest we visit this next meeting.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't really know where to go from here, so we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Thank you anyway.
Yep.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for all of your time.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it.
We're here for you.
Thank you. Next is ongoing business, which is the frontage commercial overlay sign ordinance first reading. Yep, you wanna talk to this?
Not really much to add to my memo. We discussed this at some length last meeting, and Dirk had worked on a language for the proposed amendments based on our discussion, which are before you today. And if there are any questions, I'm sure Dirk will be happy to answer them.
Sure.
For you new guys, this is a first reading only. A second reading occurs next month, and that's when you'll be asked to vote. First readings, I hope that you read the documents, and if you have questions or concerns, we can answer them now, and if there's additions or deletions, we can always take care of that too now. Prefer not to go beyond a second reading if we can avoid it. But, so first reading today, no action. Second reading next month, to vote to approve or deny.
The only thing I think we're really changing is the amount of signage per or per linear foot or per square foot of the front of the building?
Right, the two major changes, DE, are just what you said. We're mimicking Birmingham, how they deal with these kind of signs, to base the sign frontage, sign area rather, based on the lineal frontage of the principal building. That's number one, and then number two is, if you remember, for signs in the C1 district, you had to have a side entrance to have a sign on the side of the building, and we've removed that requirement for signs in the overlay district. So for the example, Royal Thai Restaurant ran into a jam because they didn't have a public entrance on the side of their building, so they couldn't have a side wall sign. This eliminates that requirement.
That was the variance that you granted last month.
Yeah.
And this now would allow someone to not have to ask for a variance.
And the lineal frontage language is almost verbatim out of Birmingham's ordinance, except the reference they had to Woodward. We didn't use that,
So
obviously.
it's really the only change we've got going.
Only major change, yeah.
And the change would, the issue with Jimmy John's, this change would prevent them from having to submit a request to their corporate headquarters for changes?
Correct, it basically,
It gives them enough, this gives them enough leeway to do what they want to do.
correct, they'd
Okay.
be able to get approval based on their original submissions,
Good.
which were denied based on our percentage, height and width
Okay.
calculation, which was a little silly with the
I agree.
one-story
I
buildings
agree,
compared to the
yeah.
4.
Okay.
As
So it
well
takes
as
care of
they
it.
already have a sign on the side, right?
There is that too, yeah.
Yeah. So the design review board had approved against our ordinance a sign on the side of Jimmy John's, so it's been there
Forever.
10 years.
forever,
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever said anything about it, and
Yeah.
it
No, this
was
is good, yeah.
approved, so we're gonna just, they just wanna replace what's there with their update, so we're gonna update our ordinance to reflect what's already been there and was approved.
Again, that's just the first reading.
First
If there are no other questions, we can just move to the treasurer's report.
No?
I guess we're moving to the treasurer's report. It's a short month, but I have an extra item that's on my agenda that typically, or on your agenda, or on the agenda, that we typically don't, so we'll start with that. In your packet, there's a sample resolution. Every year, council has to review and approve the financial institutions and depositories that we use in order to keep our funds, our tax money, and our various funds into each, which is in the investment report that you see on a monthly basis as well. So for council members that were here last term, they were already familiarized with it. For the new folks, trustees that are on here, we've listed where we don't necessarily have to have the funds deposited, but they're there. They are FDIC insured, or in the case of a credit union, they're through the National Credit Union's insurance policy that they have through the federal government, therefore portion of FDIC. And we just list them and say, those are the ones where I'm able to go ahead and deposit funds. So we need a resolution from you all to approve, to say, these are the financial institutions, we're fine with them, and that way we run, and we'll see it again in December of next year.
Right.
We add and delete depending upon too, whether or not, like for instance, last year, there was a credit union that was giving a very good rate on a CD. Unfortunately, we couldn't take advantage of that because some of the not recommendations, but are part of our investment policy. I have all financial institutions sign our investment policy, that they're abiding by that as well as Public Act 20. And they just didn't have the staffing because it was a smaller credit union and they just couldn't commit the time for it. So it was on there, but it did, we get them approved, but they just couldn't follow through with being able to actually issue the CD. But these are the ones that are within the sample resolution you have in your packet.
So are we ready for a motion?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Right now, we have not to exceed $600,000 per depository.
Correct.
If we get this SIB money and we don't use it immediately, could we invest that? At that point, then we would need to increase the 600 if we wanted to be in a particular institution.
We can do two things. The first thing is that we can increase that amount of money from 600,000 up. The second thing we can do is use the insured cash sweep that we have through Huntington Bank. That puts it within 250,000, actually less, they do 247, within other financial institutions that are fully insured, and we would maintain that we're still under the $600,000 per institution.
Because we get that money in, we're gonna have to put it someplace.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, because I want to, again, as I've said in the past, I want to maximize as much income interest as possible.
Would we need a motion then to increase the 600,000 if we want to, or can we do that at that?
We can do it at another point in time.
Okay.
Yep. Yep, it doesn't have to be done annually, it has to be done at a minimum annually, but if there's a change that we need to do prior to December of next year, I will do another sample resolution, and you guys will review it and either approve it or not approve it.
Okay. Then I move we approve.
This is a
Wait a second,
resolution,
wait a second. Ken, did you have something to say?
just that it's a resolution.
Right, right,
And that
I'm
means
asking.
it's a roll call.
Right, I'm asking for a resolution.
So you would move
To
to adopt the
approve.
resolution.
Right, move to adopt the resolution to approve the depositories as presented.
I move that we approve those listed.
Second,
A second.
roll call.
Hageman,
Aye.
Howard,
Yay.
McAlexander,
Yes.
Mashigian,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Blackburn, DeRoney.
Sorry. Answered for you.
Said aye.
I heard you too, okay, thank you.
I was ahead of,
It's all good.
All right, that passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the
Item-
approval.
Yep, item B, approval of December 2024 bills is a motion. In your packet as well, there's check disbursements from November 26, 2024 through today, December 16, 2024, from the general fund in the amount of $162. I'm sorry, $182,772.81. Disbursement from the gas and weight fund for the same dates, November 26, 2024 through today, December 16, 2024, in the amount of $2,105 for a total of $184,877.81. Any questions regarding the bills? I will point out one thing. There was a typo. It was I think my keyboard, the two keys struck for the $2,105. Under the description, it was Johnson Landscaping. It was lawn cutting, tree removal, and it says toad salting.
Yeah.
Now, although the village has toads, I don't think that Johnson Landscaping salted them.
No.
He salted the
Hopefully
roads
not.
versus the toads.
Yes. I have a toad-chasing dog.
Is there
I
a
know
motion
that.
to approve the December 2024 bills?
I make a motion to approve the December bills.
And I will second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next is the accept the financial statements for November 2024. Bill?
Yes, and it is also, thank you, it's also a motion. Two sets as it is on monthly. You have the profit and loss budget to actual through November of 2024. Again, every time I pull it, I look at it, we are right in line. We are 5 months into the fiscal year, 42%. I look at the percentages on all of it, and we are, even though we are short this month as far as having an earlier meeting, we're tracking exactly where we should be, and I compare it to last fiscal year, and we're actually doing a little bit better again from last fiscal year. So that's the portion on the revenue and profit and loss statement. Moving to, unless there's any questions on that, I will move to the investment piece. No questions? The investments for November, broken out as well between the general fund and the roads fund. You will see there's really, other than, we had one bond that I mentioned last year that was, or not last year, last month, that was called early, that has been replaced under MBS. But again, all of the rates that we've been getting are still holding up fairly strongly on both sides. I will mention, since Trustee Hageman asked the question about $600,000, you'll notice under the Michigan class pool, under the general fund, which is the third line down, there's $600,000 $819. The reason for that is the interest posts on the last day of November. I put what's on the statement in my report, and then I do a transaction to move the interest out. So I like to keep it like 599,500, as close to 600,000 so I can maximize the interest. But just so that you know, that's what happens. It moves over so that we're maintaining the rule of under $600,000. And of course, under the Huntington portion, I went through and explained on the insured cash sweeps that each one of those individual financial institutions or banks underneath the insured cash sweep is under the 600,000, is actually under the 250, so we're fully insured on that. Any questions regarding the investments for either general or roads fund?
Is there a motion to accept the financial statements for November 2024?
So moved.
I will second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we will go around the table for trustee comments. Trustee Miller?
No comments?
No comment.
I would like to announce a sad piece of news that a member of our Bingham Farms passed away yesterday. His name was Peter Shagna. He lived in several locations here in Bingham Farms, and he had a stroke on Saturday night, and he died 24 hours later.
Was he
So-
living here? In the
He was
village?
living in Outland Trail,
Uh-huh.
and he was our president, our HOA president for a good number of years at Outland Trail.
Sorry to hear
So-
that.
Is he the guy who was a runner?
Oh, no, that was, he didn't live in Bingham Farms. What was his name?
I thought his name was Pete.
Pete, you're right, Pete something, yeah.
Okay.
We've been
That's it.
looking, we kind of thought maybe he passed away too.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Any comments? No comments?
I have none.
I have no comments, so I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Meeting adjourned at 9:31.